It is a good morning indeed, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome in. The Rob Brown Show is on your radio. It's the Fan Upstate. Howdy, y'all. Happy Tuesday. And welcome into a very special edition of the show brought to you by our friends at Ingles. Low prices, love the savings. Our title sponsor for the next 3 days of college football extravaganza. We are live in Charlotte, North Carolina, the home of this year's Atlantic Coast Conference football kickoff, aka Media Days, aka the Propaganda Extravaganza. It's what we're here for. And ladies and gentlemen, let me just tell you, we're here for it. It is going to be a good day. Got up bright and early, got set up, have been walking around the hotel and taking in some of the sights. No sounds because I was the only one here at 4:30 this morning when I got to the building to get everything set up. Alas, we are ready to roll for the next 3 days, and I very much look forward to spending them with you. Looking around there's in the room that I'm in, we're looking at about 50 radio stations, television shows, podcasts, etc. The ACC network is obviously here as well, and man, it's gonna be a big 3 days of college football. And listen, I'm not going to make a secret of it. It's not going to be something that I've gotten here and I'm going to change the things that I've been saying about this conference. It has a lot of questions this year, and I think it is more than fair to say that it has a bunch of questions. I think some of those questions are going to be answered later on this morning when we have Jim Phillips take to the stage to give the state of the conference address as the conference commissioner. Obviously, later on in the day, we will have our first handful of teams that will take to the stage and talk a little bit about what it is that they expect to see this year out of their football teams. And I look forward to hearing what some of those discussions are going to sound like. But it is not a secret. It is not anything I've been unwilling to say, that I think there is a possibility that this is a down year for the Atlantic Coast Conference, and that is even compared to some of the down years that the ACC has had. I very much hope that I am wrong. I think that, as we have mentioned a number of times, there is a bounce back in store for Florida State. I don't know what that means. I don't know if that means 7-5. I don't know if that means 8-4. I don't know if that means they shock everybody and they get to a 9-3, a 10-2 record, compete for a spot in the conference championship game. I think everybody in this building is likely going to agree, and we will find out because the assembled media got their link last night to vote for the projected order of finish of the ACC. And I am not going to be shocked, and nor do I think will anybody else, if Clemson is the runaway favorite to win this conference. The question mark is going to be who is right there with them. It is easy to say that it is Southern Methodist University. Rhett Lashlee, Kevin Jennings running it back as head coach in QB1. Kevin Jennings, of course, took the QB1 spot from Preston Stone last year. Preston Stone was a preseason Heisman hopeful who ended up losing that job about midway through the season. Kevin Jennings stood up, took the QB1 job, led SMU through a fantastic end of the season, took them to an ACC title game, and let's call a spade, had Clemson very much on the ropes through 3.99 quarters of football before Cade Klubnik did a few very special things in the fourth quarter and was able to get Clemson back into the mix for a walk-off game-winning field goal that won them the conference championship and sent them to the playoffs as an automatic qualifier. Will they be back? North Carolina has Bill Belichick as as head coach this year, but there are questions about QB1, about running back. There is no Amarian Hampton on that team this year. Does Bill Belichick have it in him to take all the lessons he learned as an NFL head coach and to turn those into lessons that he can execute at the college football level and be successful? We are going to talk a little bit about that over the next 3 days. The Miami Hurricanes, as we have mentioned a number of times, a lot of questions about Miami this year. Mario Cristobal, is he a dude who can get it done? Is this a team that is going to be able to, around a new quarterback in Carson Beck, who comes over from the University of Georgia, are they going to be able to build on what it was that they did last year? Are they going to be able to build on the run that they had, which, keep in mind, they had a loss to Georgia Tech. I don't know how many times we've talked about that game, and I don't know how many more times that we will. It was a painful loss. There's no other way to put it. It was a painful loss. They turned around 2 weeks later and dropped the season finale to Syracuse 38-42, a game that, had they won, it likely would have been them in the college football playoff, either with SMU or instead of SMU. So I think it's fair to ask questions. Did they get those things fixed? Do we trust Mario Cristobal in a spot to not make those decisions? And then there's plenty of other teams that feel like it's a season that can make or break them for a number of years as a program. The Georgia Tech Rambling Wreck, I've made no secret that I am a big Brent Key guy. I think their head coach is just a football dude. And I think at a school like a Georgia Tech, I think you need just a football dude. I think you need just a football dude, a dude who does not care about anything but the program, because the resources at a school like a Georgia Tech obviously are not going to be as available as they are at a lot of other schools in this conference. Not only is it a small alumni base, an elite alumni base, but a small alumni base that Brent Key has boosting up around him. But it is a smaller school. They are right in the middle of a big city. They have got obviously a footprint that sits dead center in SEC and ACC territory. They are not just competing against Clemson. They are competing against Georgia and Tennessee and Alabama and Auburn and Florida State and Florida for whatever it is that they can get. So I love Brent Key, and I do think he can do things that are special at Georgia Tech. The question is, what's special? What does that mean for the Rambling Wreck at Georgia Tech? They've got Haynes King. There's a lot of folks here that are going to believe that Haynes King is one of the better quarterbacks in college football. And there are going to be a lot of people here who believe that we've already seen the best that we are going to see out of Haynes King, that we have seen the best that he can do, and the best he can do is lead an 8-4, a 7-5 football team, which is still a good mark for Georgia Tech. But I suspect Brent Key's not happy. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about Duke and what it is that this team has gone through. They had a lot of upward momentum under Mike Elko, but Mike Elko left. He's over at Texas A&M now. He is now the Colt leader. And so the question now is, as they went and got Manny Diaz to become the HC, a dude that has had opportunities elsewhere and not been able to convert them at schools that certainly had more resources, at schools that certainly had more on the table in terms of the ability to recruit, the ability to raise money, the ability to put NIL down on the table. As a matter of fact, Duke is coming into this season with a brand new QB1. And the reason they're coming in with Darian Mensah as their new QB is last year's quarterback got up out of Dodge. Why? Because he got the bag elsewhere. So what does that mean for Duke? We're going to talk about that. There's a lot of different angles in this conference that, yes, I understand. This conference is not the Southeastern Conference. This conference is not the Big Ten. I think this year it might even be fair to say that the Big 12 is a better football conference top to bottom. I think that's a preseason prognostication. I think there is every possibility that the ACC could get it right. Some teams could be shocking again. If Lonzo is correct and Bill Belichick's knowledge of the game of football and ability to run a program with an iron fist, if that translates to the college level, then yes, North Carolina does have some talent. Again, no Omarion Hampton, no Drake May at QB running back, but they've got a little bit of talent, and Bill Belichick, you hope, can develop that. Pat Narduzzi at Pitt. Like, it's a team that every single year when we discuss the Pitt Panthers, the discussion is they're close. The discussion every year is it feels like the Pitt Panthers need one or two more pieces. It feels like they could get there. It feels like Pat Narduzzi is the guy to elevate them to that next level. Is this the year that they get that done? Is SMU headed back to the playoff? If the answer to these questions are yes, maybe there are 5 or 6 teams in the Atlantic Coast Conference that can do something, that can make a little bit of noise, that can become an interesting program. And again, maybe not all of them end up in the college football playoff, but maybe some of them have the opportunity to impact it. Maybe some of them have the opportunity to shape it. Maybe some of them have the opportunity to lay a foundation down in 2025 that elevates them moving forward. So again, I don't think it's a great year in the ACC in terms of overall talent. I just don't. I don't think it's a deep conference. I think you're looking at probably 2 teams that are clearly at the top, Clemson number 1, Miami number 2. I think you're looking at an SMU team that's right in the back pocket of Miami. Then I think you're looking at a big step down at a number of other teams. Florida State, Georgia Tech, perhaps North Carolina, perhaps Pitt. I'll tell you right now, Virginia Tech is a team I'm very interested in following over this year. Virginia Tech is a team that I was dead wrong about last year. I thought last year's Virginia Tech team was going to be different. I did. We had a couple of VTech guys that came on the show last year. I loved the attitude of that team. I loved the mentality of that team. They brought the lunchbox. They were hitting it on every table that they did here on Radio Row. Like, it genuinely felt like that team had a great mentality, had a great attitude, and was in a great spot. And then they lost to Vanderbilt, and then they lost to Rutgers, and then they lost to Miami, and then they lost to Syracuse, and they got hammered by Clemson, and they lost at Duke, and they lost to Minnesota in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. Like, it was a team that I thought was going to be special under Brent Pry. And it was, I don't want to say it was an abject disaster, but it certainly wasn't good. It was a Virginia Tech team that was 67th in the country in scoring. They were 108th in the country in passing. They were 61st in passing defense, 63rd in rushing defense, which it wasn't what they wanted. And if you have, as I do, followed the conversation about the fans or from the fans about that football team, they're not happy. And I understand that they're not happy. I understand last year was disappointing. They had expectations of a 10-2, a 9-3 season to, if not win the ACC, at least be in that mix, and they were nowhere close to in that mix. So is there a bounce back here for Brent Pry in Virginia Tech? I don't know that I would say that it's, a crossed Brent Pry, his job kind of year, but I don't know that it's not. That's where that football program is. So again, I look at this conference top to bottom. I look at this conference in its entirety. It's not good. It's not good today on July 22nd, 2025 with 32 days until week 2. I mean, tomorrow will be 1 month from the beginning of the college football season with week 0 arriving. 1 month away, a month and a day. There's still a lot of time. We've still got, the short fall camps and fall practices. We've got a couple of more media days to get through. There's still a good amount of time between here and week 1, or week 0, I guess I should say. But what I can say, and what I will say is this: it looks like a down year for the Atlantic Coast Conference. I hope that I'm wrong. I'd like to be wrong. I think, and it's not a Clemson thing. It's not an ACC thing. It is nothing more than college football is better when we have more teams in it. We have already talked about the parity across college football this year. I think there's probably 8 to 9 teams that are legitimate national championship contenders this year. I think there's 11 teams in the SEC that can win that conference. The parity in college football this year, and yes, I am giving it credit to the transfer portal. I'm giving credit to name, image, and likeness. I think that the theory that those of us had that were pro portal, that were pro NIL, the theory that it will spread talent around, the theory that it will result in more good players going to more schools around the country. The haves will still have, the have-nots will still be fighting to have a little bit of, but it will result in a bit of parity around the league. And I think that that is true. And I think, unfortunately, the ACC has not yet shown that they are the beneficiary of that. There's a lot of talent in this league. Is it coaching? Is it resources? I don't know. I will also say, and this is just kind of a working theory. I do wonder how much the lawsuits have to do with that. I do wonder how much the discussion about Florida State, Clemson, Miami, North Carolina, Duke, all potentially leaving in 5, 6, 7, 10 years to go to the Big Ten or the SEC has to do with it. I do wonder how much volatility is there because of all that. I don't think the answer is very much. But to say it has no impact, I don't know that I'm comfortable with that. I think there's a million different factors in this conference that have to be addressed, and that's why we're here, people. 3 days of college football propaganda extravaganza live from the ACC Media Days in Charlotte, North Carolina. Now, with all of that being said, I'm so rude. How discourteous of me. Back in the network studio in charge of every pleasant sound that will tickle your inner earballs for the next 3 days. The great one, Lonzo, in charge of the show. Zoe, I know you're all kinds of fired up for the next 72 hours. Okay. I'm looking around. There's some Miami guys in front of me. There's WQAM. I don't know who WQAM is. I don't know where they're from. They don't have like a location, like a geographical location on their little banner. Okay. Let's see. We got West Palm here. We got Miami. We got 93.3 FM in Tallahassee. We've got Sports Shop Radio. And we've got, yeah, that's it. That's who's here this morning. I'm not saying there's nobody, but I'm going to keep an eye out. Now, I will say this, jokes aside, you will be getting, he's from Ireland, not North Carolina. I happen to know that one for a fact. I believe there is a Dublin, North Carolina, though, so like maybe it's a crossover. Here's what I will tell you. Radio Row this year for the Atlantic Coast Conference. There's as many stations as there has been in years gone by. There's about, like I said, I'd estimate there's probably about 40 stations that have a station here. And I know that there are some that do not do their show from Radio Row because they do it like roving around, whatever, because it's recorded, yada, yada, yada. But there's probably 40 stations right where I am. And they do have a great one, the three of us from our market, our direct competitors. And then there is a network that covers Clemson. They have all three of our tables next to each other, 1, 2, 3, and a row, which is unsurprising. They've done that every year. But what I will say is the tables are remarkably close together, like distractingly close together. And I'm intrigued to see what that's going to do over the next few days, because I have already apologized to the young men ahead of me from Atlanta, Georgia. Said, hey, look, if I get to the point that I'm broadcasting my show on your network accidentally, turn around and throw stuff at me, I can reach to my left and touch the table next to me from the Locked On ACC podcast. Like, we're packed up in here. So I'm going to tell you, I'll be excited. I'll have some fun. We all will. That's the goal here. You're not going to get the full unbridled volume of One Rob Brown, because I'm relatively sure I will get punched in the face. And what I can tell you at 6:19 in the morning, before most of the stations are even here and set up, great one, is that I know for a fact that on Radio there's at least 3 former ACC football players who are all way bigger than me, like dramatically. There are at least 45 more stations to fill in their tables here, and I'm already at the absolute best, like 4th in the battle row, like 4th place in the battle row, like already. And there's 40 more stations to fill in. So there will not be before. And here's what I want. What I don't want is a bunch of hate to ACC Karen, because she's not here. The ACC network's way up on the second floor, way in the back. So there's no ACC Karen this year. There's just a bunch of former athletes who I'm pretty sure would kick my ass, and I'm not trying to get it whooped on the floor of the Hilton Hotel in Charlotte, North Carolina. All right? That's not where I want my first kicking to come from. It's true. I mean, if it does happen, at least it'll stream live to the world. Maybe we'll get some clicks and some likes. Hey, speaking of clicks and likes, come to the live stream, facebook.com/TheFanUpstate. The Fan Upstate on YouTube and the Twitter. You can also check out The Rob Brown Show live on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Twitch. We'd love to have you. We're streaming all 3 shows, all 4 hours live. When we come back, let's dive right in. We've already talked a little bit about some of the questions for some of the teams in the ACC. So what are the overwhelming questions and takes about the ACC? Let's set up this conference's 2025 football season in its entirety, and we'll break it down over the next few days here on the Rob Brown Show, live from ACC Media Days in Charlotte, North Carolina, presented by our friends from Ingles. This is the Fan Upstate. Styrofoam box with cold French fries still in the bed with me. That's how fast I knocked out.
Then the Clemson tie. Clemson got in on the final week
of the
season, if you will, final win of the season.
than to be able to knock out all 3 media days in one year. Like, let's do SEC, ACC, Big Ten. Let's just hit the whole thing. I'd love to go to Big 12 too, but we are happy to be here at ACC Media Days in Charlotte, North Carolina, courtesy of our friends at Ingles. Let's get into this conference as a whole, because obviously that's what we're here to do. We spent last week at the Southeastern Conference Propaganda Extravaganza. We did the same for the Atlantic Coast Conference Propaganda Extravaganza this week. So let's take a look at the teams across this conference. And let's take a look a little bit at what these teams did last year and how these teams set up moving into this year. Some of the biggest moments, some of the biggest narratives, some of the biggest storylines, some of the biggest narratives from each of the schools in the conference, and kind of get just a 36,000 foot view of what every team in this conference is going to look like moving to the 2025 season. And we'll go down the list alphabetically. I was kind of looking up what each off season looked like for every team. What are the major talking points for every team that took place over the past few months since the college football season ended 2 weeks ago? And here's what I've got for you. As far as Boston College goes, this is a team that is routinely overlooked in the conference, yet it is a team that routinely pulls an upset that shapes what the final standings of the conference look like. You all know about Red Bandana Day at Boston College. That is a game that means a lot to Boston College, and that is a game that annually ends up against a Florida State, or it ends up against the Clemson, or it ends up against the Louisville. It ends up against a team that has conference championship aspirations. And Red Bandana Day regularly ends up with some sort of upset over a team that, again, has those expectations. Bill O'Brien put in a tough spot this year because back in February, Jeff Hafley took off for the NFL. Hafley was the biggest name in Boston College recruiting. He was a big part of the cycle that has produced some probably above expectations draft classes for Boston College. What did Boston College do? They ended up signing 27 players from 15 states. Now, that puts them in kind of an interesting spot. It puts them in an interesting spot, Boston College, because a lot of the talent that they brought in is developmental talent. These are not guys that are brought in that are ready to go. These are not guys that they brought in that are plug and play. There's a lot of young cats on this BC roster. There's a lot of dudes on this BC roster that are likely going to take a little bit of time to kind of find their stride. As far as Boston College goes overall, looking at the schedule, looking at how things set up for BC, here's what you're looking at for the 2025 schedule. They got Fordham on the road at Michigan State in week 2. Then it's at Stanford to open ACC play before they come back home for Cal. Turn around and head to Pittsburgh the week after that. October 11th, Clemson comes to town, followed by the UConn Huskies. Back to ACC play on the 25th of October when they take on the Louisville Cardinal. It will be Notre Dame November 1st, followed by SMU and Georgia Tech. All 3 of those games in Boston, and then they'll wrap up on the road at Syracuse on November 29th. This was a team last year that handed Florida State a loss. This was a team last year that handed Michigan State a loss. It was in Boston College. This is a home-and-home series. This is a team last year that handed North Carolina a 20-point loss, handed Pitt I believe, an 11-point loss last year. But they also had some dumb losses. They lost at Virginia. Tony Elliott, and that's another team we got to have the conversation about, is former Clemson offensive coordinator Tony Elliott at Virginia. Is there a go-ahead year? Is there a step-ahead year for Tony Elliott this year? We're going to talk about that. This is a team that lost to SMU, but they kept them game for a hot minute this past year. Grayson James and Dylan Lonergan are on their way, are both stepping in to compete for QB1 at Boston College, who has been on a slight but consistent uphill trend. But as we mentioned, if you look across the starting 22 for BC, there are a lot of new guys. The offense brings back 4 returning starters. The defense brings back just 3. Now, There was a lot of seniors on this team. In fact, I'm looking at the defensive depth chart right now. There are 7 seniors starting on this defense this year. On the offensive side of the football, I believe that there are 5 seniors starting. So a lot of experience comes back for Boston College, but a lot of guys that did not necessarily get a ton of PT the last year. You're going to be relying on guys to be finding experience, and the places you did plug in recruits, those are spots that you got recruits, you got young guys, you got kids that have to develop. Now, the good news for Boston College is you've got in Bill O'Brien a guy who has made a narrative of being a player developer the last couple of years. The problem you have for Boston College, however, is Boston College is the exact type of school that would develop a player only to then watch that player transfer out in the next year. We'll see if that becomes a problem. California, the Bears signed a small class, just 18 overall prospects coming into this year, but that was by design because Cal is also a team that used the transfer portal very heavily. You are going to hear the name Jayon Young. He is a 4-star cornerback that came in. You also have Trey Harrison, a very heady safety and one of the top players out west. He transfers over from Berkeley, who was one of the better players on their team, but he's also a cat that comes over with a 4.8 GPA, fitting into what Cal is trying to do on the defensive side of the football.
I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about playing.
Yeah, well, some, and I don't listen. I don't pretend to know how the California schools run their business. I know when I was in high school that you could get a 5, but you had to take all AP classes. So like regular classes, you could get 4 points for an A. AP classes, upper level classes, you got 5 points if you got an A, 4 if you got a B. So you could have if you took all AP classes, you got all Bs, you would still have a 4.0 GPA. If you take all upper level classes and you got all A's, you could have a 5 GPA. So I'm going to assume that's probably the same at Cal, but listen, if they're Rob and Bo know ball. Rob and Bo don't know GPA. All right, that's why I talk on the radio for a living. That's what that is. All right, here's what I'll say about Cal. Here's the interesting narrative about this football team coming into the year. Perhaps no team got hit harder by transfer portal players out. Their starting quarterback, who was expected to come back, Fernando Mendoza, left for Indiana. They lost 3 of their top 4 receivers from last year. They lost 4 of their starting 5 running backs last year, including Jaden Ott, who went to Oklahoma, is expected to be a huge part of the Boomer Sooner offense this year. Jack Endries, their major tight end from last year, headed to Texas. So Brian Harrison and the offensive coordinator are going to have their work cut out for them. Good portal in class, but it absolutely does not match up with the guys that they lost out. So that's kind of a reset there. I'll skip Clemson for right now because obviously we're going to spend a ton of time talking about the Clemson Tigers over the course of the next 2 days. But when we come back here in a minute, we'll knock out a few more schools. Let's take a look at the season narrative for the Duke Blue Devils. We'll take a look at the season narrative for the Seminoles of Florida State. And we'll take a look at the season narrative of the Georgia Tech Ramblin' Wreck under Brent Key when we come back in the next segment of the show. In the next hour, we'll have your water cooler cheat sheet to open the gate because, yes, there are other sports taking place around these great United States. So we'll check in on the rest of the sportosphere after that. And then in the rest of the 7 o'clock hour, we'll keep looking at this conference team by team, asking the questions and getting the answers that you need to know as we get set up for the 2025 Atlantic Coast Conference football season. We are live at ACC Media Days in Charlotte, North Carolina, presented by our friends at Ingles. Low prices, love the savings. This is a special edition of the Rob Brown Show. This is the Fan Upstate. for having me.
They did have a
It is the Rob Brown Show. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, live from ACC Media Days here in Charlotte, North Carolina, today, tomorrow, and Thursday. And it is spectacular to have you all along for the ride. We want to thank our presenting sponsor, Ingles. Low prices love the savings. We love Ingles. They love us. That's why we're here, and we appreciate them very, very much because of it. I also appreciate that I was able to stop at my Ingles and grab myself about 5 monsters to stack up for the 3 days that I will be here, and then forgot to bring any of them with me. This is not even caffeinated, Rob Brown, ladies and gentlemen. This is just raw adrenaline and excitement about being here. We are taking a look at the conference as a whole. We are looking at every team in the conference and breaking down top to bottom what it is that are the biggest storylines, the biggest narratives, the biggest questions. And to me, the best way to get that started is to look at where these teams ended up last year, how the offseason shaped up, and to ask what coincides and what questions got asked, what got answered, and what are still to be considered. We did Boston College and Cal in a short segment last. Let's move over and roll into the next group of teams. I'm going to come back to Clemson. Obviously, we will spend quite a bit of time in the 7 o'clock hour and then throughout the rest of the show discussing where Clemson fits into all of the other conversations that we are having. And obviously, the consensus here, at least for me, the consensus of me, is that when we get our media projected order of finish, which we were asked last night to vote on, I have not done that yet. We don't have to turn it in until Thursday. I will spend some time evaluating. I love getting the opportunity to speak with, to listen to some of the coaches and some of the players at this event before I decide to lock in my votes, because even though sometimes it has been right and sometimes it has been wrong, I've had my opinions changed at this event a number of times over the years. There have been some situations, again, Brent Key and Georgia Tech. We got done with our conversation with Brent Key last year, and I was like, yo, this Tech team could be a problem. All right. Now, again, not win the conference, but they could be a problem. I'm interested to see where that goes. So we'll talk a little bit more about the projected order finish. Obviously, I think, and I'm sure most people here are going to think, that Clemson is going to be the fan favorite and the media favorite to win this conference when it is all said and done. But where are the threats? Where are the hidden dangers? Where are the perils and pitfalls? I think we got to look at the rest of the conference to find that out. As far as the Duke Blue Devil go, Coach Manny Diaz, we know about what Manny Diaz has done in the past. He's had a few other spots as head coach, as defensive coordinator, et cetera, et cetera. When Mike Elko left the Duke Blue Devil program, a guy that I thought had that team trending upwards. We were at SEC Media Days last week, and we talked to David Nuno of TexAgs Live. The Aggies fans love Mike Elko, and I'm completely and entirely unsurprised and unshocked by that. Elko's an old school football coach. He is one of those guys in going to Texas A&M. He is one of those cats where it kind of feels like it fits, right? I'm talking about the personality fits the culture of the school. He's an old school kind of blue collar gritty football coach, and those World War II cosplaying cultists, they love that. That's Texas football at its finest. So that's a good fit. Manny Diaz comes to Duke. He was Penn State's defensive coordinator, and over the past couple of years has kind of been a thorn in Penn State side and Michigan State side. As a matter of fact, he's got a couple of recruiting wins over Penn State and over Michigan State, etc. One of them was four-star tight end and linebacker Bradley Gompers. Bradley Gompers, Gompers. Bradley Gompers. Bradley Gompers comes over. He may be a both ways guy. He may be a more one than the other and sparingly guy. We don't know. We'll see where he fits in. But he was a four-star player that was being recruited by, not an exaggeration, every school in the Big Ten. Classic old school Big Ten Midwestern kind of dude. And he ends up at Duke. That's Manny Diaz. Again, you can say what you want about the coaching successes and failures of Manny Diaz. But he's a guy that players love, always has been. He's a guy that players line up behind. We can talk about his time at Miami and North Carolina, all these other places that he was. But at the end of the day, players love him, and he's getting guys to come to Duke. Now, is he going to be able to take those players and continue on what Mike Elko was doing before he left to go to A&M? I don't know yet, but there are some guys. He also was able to beat out NC State, North Carolina, Wake Forest, Clemson, and a host of other schools from the Carolinas that were in play for Bryce Davis, a top 75 prospect edge rusher who kind of had offers from most of the big schools across the Southeast. Manny Diaz got that guy to Duke. This is one of the reasons why I have said I think a lot of the old assumptions, a lot of the old narratives, a lot of the old paradigm about Duke, I think a lot of people may get caught by surprise. Again, not claiming that Duke is going to be competing for an ACC championship this year. I'm saying Duke's getting better classes and more talent than they've ever got before. And now it's on Manny Diaz. Is he going to be able to develop that? Is he going to be able to plug that into the right places on his team? Is he going to be able to execute with those guys? If the answer is yes, then this team gets interesting. Keep in mind, this was a 9-3 regular season football team last year. Wins over Elon, Northwestern, UConn, Middle Tennessee, and North Carolina. They lost at Georgia Tech. A number of teams did. They beat FSU. The two teams they lost to, their last two losses in the regular season, were SMU, who they took to overtime, and Miami. And, of course, Miami dropped 53 on them, but that was the point where Miami was kind of hitting their stride in the middle of the season. They ended with wins over NC State, Virginia Tech, and Wake Forest. They did get hammered by Ole Miss in the bowl game, but as I've said a lot of times, who the hell cares about bowl games? If it ain't the playoffs, it's just an exhibition. Who cares? I'm not holding that against them. 9-3 were the Duke Blue Devils last year. They upgraded at quarterback after Malik Murphy passed for nearly 3,000 yards. He did leave. They bring in Darian Mensah from the transfer portal. Darian Mensah is getting 8 years in NIL for 3 years of eligibility remaining. So effectively, my man is checking in at what, $2 and some change million or whatever it is. In 13 games for Tulane, the mobile Mensah threw for 22 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, completed 66% of his throws, threw for over 2,700 yards, rushed for another 132. Keep in mind, one of the issues they had with Malik Murphy last year, Murphy got picked off 12 times the most in the ACC and completed 60% of his passes, good for 13th in the conference. And again, he was at Tulane. All right, I'm not going to sit here and be like, oh, he did that at Florida State. What a grab. He did it at Tulane. Tulane also has played some good teams the last few years. So if he's able to bring that consistency to Duke, and he can down the number of interceptions, up the completion percentage for a team that went 9-3 last year and had a solid recruiting class where they were stealing guys from Penn State and Clemson, maybe Duke's interesting there. Let's get to Florida State. The Noles made a push to improve their high school recruiting this year. That is a narrative that I think is being overlooked. We all know the last 2 years, Mike Norvell has lived and died in the portal. In 2023, he lived in the portal. They went 13-0. They won the Atlantic Coast Conference Championship. Yes, they did get irresponsibly and inappropriately left out of the college football playoff in the final year of the 14 playoff, but 13-0. ACC crown and should have gone to the playoff. Then obviously last year they died by the portal. 2-10. Things did not go well. They are still leaned on the transfer portal. There are still a number of guys that came in, but they did spend a lot of time in the recruiting class. They got number 9 defensive lineman Kevin Wynn out of Greensboro, Georgia. LeJesse Harold of Tampa is another top 100 recruit across the defensive line. They did bring in 16 winter transfers after a brutal season of last year. But here is the big storyline and one we're going to talk about with Florida State quite a bit between here and kickoff. There are 2 names that I think will go a very long way, if not be the determining factor of whether or not there is a bounce back for this team, the Florida State Seminoles, next year. Those 2 names are Thomas Castellanos. He is the former Boston College quarterback who transferred over from last year, and Gus Malzahn, who comes over to be the offensive coordinator. Now, I'm super intrigued by that combination because if you look at the history of Gus Malzahn has worked with some exceptional mobile two-style quarterbacks over the year. He has tinkered with a lot of mobile quarterbacks and has had some level of success with them. This is a guy who took over the Auburn Tiger head coaching position, and you may very well remember back in 2014, Gus Malzahn was the head coach of the Auburn Tigers. The Auburn Tigers would lose to these very same Florida State Seminoles in the 2013-14 national championship, but they came out of the ACC. They were in charge of that game for a very large portion of the game before Florida State's offense under Jameis Winston just turned it on. Who did Jameis Winston have to outduel in that game to get there? Who was the guy on the other side that they had to knock off? Cam Newton. Like this was a Gus Malzahn led team that had a lot of dudes to it. And now he brings that same ability to coach a guy like that to a national championship to Florida State. And I'm not arguing Thomas Castellanos is anywhere close to any of these other guys that we've talked about. What I'm saying is the dude's got some boot scoot out of the pocket, and that's the type of guy that Gus Malzahn is able to do or has done historically his best work with. So to me, we can talk about the defense for Florida State. It's a mentality thing as far as I'm concerned. The defense in Florida State last year, the longer it went, the more obvious it felt to me. Like Florida State brought in a bunch of transfer portal dudes who transfer portaled in to get that dollar bill. And I ain't mad at it, man. Get the bag if you can get the bag. But at the same time, they're like, if you're a head coach like Gus Malzahn, you very much want to, like Mike Norvell, you very much want to build an excellent locker room culture. That's what they did in 2023 or 2023 when they went 13-0. The locker room culture last year, I've got friends in Tallahassee covering this team. They said it stank. As soon as the boys were done taking whatever the most recent butt whooping was they took, they get back to the locker room, music's playing, they're dancing, having a good time like nothing ever happened, right? And while I may have a good time, it's a game, whatever, dude. If a loss doesn't bother you at all, you're not going to achieve anything. And I think that's what happened. So that's the big story about Florida State is Thomas Castellanos and Gus Malzahn. And the mix, because it is much more of a mixed bag this year, the mix of adding more into the high school recruiting bucket, but also going portal heavy. Are those two different styles of players going to be able to gel, mesh, form a successful locker room? And then let's get to Georgia Tech real quick before we run to the break. Georgia Tech just put together maybe, I'm not saying definitively, maybe the best recruiting class they have put together in a very long time. 5-star offensive tackle Josh Petty of Roswell, Georgia came up. This was a dude that everybody was looking forward to. He beat out Kirby Smart to grab this guy. Georgia Tech's class ranked 21st. That is the highest in the 24/7 ranking era. It also landed a quartet of 4-star prospects in addition to Petty, including a top 75 quarterback Trey Harris of Cedartown High School. This is the best Georgia Tech Rambling Wreck recruiting class of all time. And I put that on Brent Key, right? Like Brent Key's a football dude. He lives football, sleeps football, eats football, breathes football. I can do this, I swear to you. And those type of football players are still out there. I know there are a lot of you that have what I consider respectfully a very misguided notion that every college football player in America is just in it for the money now. They're just in it for the NIL. They're just in it to get paid. And there are a lot of them that are. What I'm saying is there are a lot of them that do love football. If they can get paid to do it, great. It's literally what all of us do for a living, right? Like, I love this job. I love doing it. I love it so much I get up at 3:30 in the morning to do it. I like sleep more than I like most things in life. It's like my wife, my dogs, sleep, and then everything else comes in line after that. But I get up because I love the job. Here's the thing. I don't do it for free. I do it to get paid. And as I've said many, many times, it would take a lot to get me up out of here. But there's somebody out there makes the phone call and says, Rob Brown will give you this much to come work. I'm gone, kids. It's not that I don't love y'all. Not that I don't love this area. I just like making that money. So, yes, I still love the job. There are football players who still love playing football. Brent Key's the type of dude that loves to go get football players that love to play football. That's why he's got a top 25 class for the first time ever. They've got Haynes King, battled through injuries last year. There were spots in the season where he could barely throw the football, had to run a lot. Aaron Philo looked sharp late in relief, but King is projected to be one of the top quarterbacks in the country. Also ran for 11 touchdowns, added on to the 14 that he threw for, rushed for 500-plus yards in the second straight season. And they bring back Jamal Haynes, who battled through his own injuries, just missed 1,000 yards last year. They also bring back a solid number of wide receivers. I am telling you right now, the Georgia Tech Ramblin' Wreck, they could be the spoiler alert team this year. They could be the team that has an impact. They are at Colorado to open the season. They could, honestly, I think Georgia Tech could beat Colorado by 21. And that will put the nation on notice. Georgia's here, if only because of the attention on Colorado. Gardner-Webb, Clemson in week 3, and that is in Atlanta. We talked about the perils and pitfalls of the Clemson season. There's number 1. Then it's Temple at Wake Forest, back home for Virginia Tech at Duke. Then Syracuse at the crib, back-to-back roadies at NC State and Boston College, back home for Pittsburgh. And then they wrap it up with Georgia in the Mercedes-Benz Dome in Atlanta to end the year. Georgia Tech's a legitimate 8-4 threat. Georgia Tech, if Haynes King is the best that he can be, that's a 9-3 football team, and I mean it. We'll talk more about that. We'll look at the other storylines and narratives. Water cooler cheat sheet when we come back. Quite a bit of Auburn talk, Clemson talk. Gus Malzahn got me Auburn on the brain. Clemson talk in the next hour of the show. I'm Rob Brown. He's the great with Lonzo. Speaking of 5 stars, 5-star sports flash right now.
Miami on top. Mario, Chris Paul.
1 hour in the books, 11 more to go, not consecutively, like spread out over 3 days, but 11 more hours to go here at ACC Media Days, the ACC football kickoff live in Charlotte, North Carolina. That's where we are currently situated, getting ready for today, tomorrow, and Thursday at the ACC's college football kickoff, presented by our friends at Ingles. Low prices, love the savings. We are ever grateful to Ingles for helping us out, being the title sponsor of last week's Rob Brown Show at SEC Media Days, and this week's Rob Brown Show here at ACC Media Days. Folks, starting to fill in during the break. I was over talking to our buddy Brandon McGinnis with the ACC, who has been my contact with the league for the 5 years that I've been here. Phenomenal dude, phenomenal young man. He pretty much sets this event up and does a fantastic job of it. The ACC Network is upstairs starting their television broadcast day coming up here in about 59 minutes from now. And I did see just about 5 minutes ago, as we were going to break, the commissioner of the Atlantic Coast Conference, Jim Phillips, make his way into the building, up the escalators to where the TV sets are. I will tell you that I do have, and again, this event is different this year than it has been in years gone by, and I understand it. All right, this is not a gripe nor complaint. The ACC this year, in years gone by, effectively, it was kind of a grab-and-go situation. You went to the conference and you said, we'd like to interview these people. And the ACC built out their interview schedule for them at this event. And if you requested a guy and you get a spot on the schedule, they brought him to you. This year, they left each individual school's sports information director in charge of scheduling their own school's visit to Radio Row. And what makes that very interesting is obviously those schools, and this is what happened at SEC Media Days last week. I believe it is the same formula they use for the Big Ten. Effectively, they say to the schools, you guys book your own Radio Row interview schedule, Radio Row school stations. You get with the schools, and you guys set up your interviews with them. Well, obviously, what happens is each school basically prioritizes, as they are only here for about 4 or 5 hours each. They've got their obligations to the ACC Network. They've got their press conference obligations. They each have a breakout Q&A throughout the day. And then they basically fill in their Radio Row schedule around that, with priority being on the teams that they cover in the market. So we are going to get you as much player and coach audio as we can. We will, throughout the next 3 days, have interviews with radio and television personalities who cover the teams that Clemson will play in the ACC this year. I've already spoken with a couple of stations out of Texas that cover SMU, because I would love to talk about SMU. We also do have our request in with schools. I've got a request in to talk to Rhett Lashley and the quarterback Kevin Jennings. I've got request in to talk to Brent Key. It is up to the schools who they schedule, what they schedule. So we're going to get you as much as we can over the next 3 days. But I will also tell you, we will be live at the Q&As. We will be live at the press conferences throughout the next 3 days. The only one that I know we will not be live for, or at least in the room with, is Jim Phillips' press conference, the State of the Conference address, which will be at 9 o'clock this morning. At 9 a.m. is the Commissioners' Forum upstairs. Now, what I will also tell you about that is that they will be portaling that conference room to us. So what I am hoping is that in the 9 o'clock hour, we'll actually be able to check in live with the Commissioner's press conference and listen to some snippets here and there throughout that hour and respond and react in real time to what the Commissioner is saying in the 9 o'clock hour. But I will also tell you that throughout the course of the day today, I will be pulling sound from that press conference. We also have on the slate today, as far as teams go, Cal, Miami, SMU, Stanford, and Virginia. I do have requests in to get Carson Beck from Miami on the show. As we mentioned, Rhett Lashley, Kevin Jennings from SMU. I have got a request in for Tony Elliott to join us here on the show, if for no other reason than I want to see what shoes my man wears this year, because this dude rolls up in the designer custom painted AF1s every year, and they are sick nasty. every year. So I got a request in for Tony Elliott. But again, there are, I believe I saw already at least 2 or 3 different radio stations and podcasts from around Virginia. It is likely they will be prioritized by Virginia football. We'll see who we get and what we get. Stay tuned. It's going to be a surprise for me, just like it is for you. But do know that we have them in, and I will be, as soon as we are off the air at 10 o'clock, I will be headed up the escalator with our microphone, with our recording gear, to be in the breakout sessions, the Q&As, the press conferences, and I will ask a few questions, and if nothing else, we will be able to give you those questions and answers from every player and coach over the next few days here on the show. It is going to be busy with a capital B. I am Rob Brown, the Great Lonzo, back in the network studio this AM as we are again live in Charlotte, North Carolina for ACC Media Days. It is 7:06 Eastern Standard Time in the AM portion of the day, which means you have less than 54 minutes until you have got to get your behind into the office, until you've got to get yourself set up. You got to respond to all those annoying passive-aggressive emails. You got to ignore those couple of things the boss said, I need this by lunchtime. Yeah, there you want to do it at lunchtime. That's annoying. Let's be honest. You don't want to have to deal with that, right? Instead, what you want to do is you want to take that break that you are legally required to take, that break that you are legally obligated to take. And you want to go talk some sports with your coworkers, at least the couple that you like. Well, if you're going to go talk sports with your coworkers, you got to know what's going on in the world of sports. And if you got to know what's going on in the world of sports, well, ladies and gentlemen, don't you worry. You've come to the right place. You're going to know what's going on in the world of sports because we do this.
I think they also miss SMU. So,
yeah, they do.
Do they play Louisville?
They do play, they do not play Louisville.
So no Louisville, no Miami, no SMU. Georgia Tech, baby, it's your time.
And then the way the schedule lays out, it's almost as even as you can get it. You play 4, you get a bye. You play 4 more, you get a bye. So when injuries pop up, you have a chance to manage those.
It is the water cooler cheat sheet, the top 3 sports stories that you need to know before you get to the office this AM and start talking sports, because when you do, this is what you'll be talking about. It is these items and these items in particular that will be the standout focused, at least I think so. That's why I made them today's water cooler cheat sheet item. Let us dive right in with item number 1.
You're going to have to figure out a way to have a balanced attack.
It is going to be an interesting next couple of weeks. Why? Well, here's what we know is going on right now. We know that NFL training camps are underway. We know the NFL Hall of Fame game, if you are paying attention to this sort of thing, Lonzo, is 9 days away. 9 days. We are now single-digit days away from actual full contact, helmet, shoulder pads, pants, cleats, football on a grass field with fans around it. Doesn't count, doesn't matter, doesn't stand. I love preseason football, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later on because I am going to do my best to sell y'all on watching preseason NFL football. It's not going to work, but I'm going to try anyway. 9 days away from that with camp Sunday. We got NASCAR going on. We just ran at Dover. We're getting to the end of the in-season championship, which I'm going to tell you has both been better and worse than I thought that it was going to be. We may get into that a little bit later on. We've got, obviously, Summer League basketball's over, so we're in the doldrums of the basketball season. Right now, we have baseball. Now, we have ACC Media Days and Big Ten Media Days happening right now. We have preseason prognostications, predictions, and projections for college football. It is, as Steve Spurrier calls it, talking season. There's only one sport for the most part, the WNBA and Major League Baseball. So 2 sports, sorry, I can count, that are happening right now. Baseball is one of them, and for the foreseeable future, as much fun as it isn't for me, the Braves winning a game is an item. Item number 1, 9-5 last night. The Atlanta Braves win game number 1 over the San Francisco Giants. Bryce Elder went 108 pitches in a 5-inning performance, surrendered 8 hits and 3 earned runs, just 1 strikeout in the match. But was an effective ground ball pitcher last night, which is kind of where he is in his career. You're not going to see Bryce Elder rack up 10, 11 Ks in a game like you would a guy like Grant Holmes. Bryce Elder's a guy who's going to try to end up surrendering a handful of hits, but is going to get a ton of ground balls, a ton of double plays, et cetera, et cetera. He did his job last night and went deep doing it. 108 pitches, 8 hits, 3 runs allowed, and 1 strikeout. Aaron Bummer came in, Rafael Montero and De Los Santos all came in to cap it off. Bummer, Montero gave up a hit. De Los Santos gave up a pair. It looked for a minute like the Braves were going to try, despite scoring 9 runs in the contest, to make this one competitive. But, y'all, I don't mean to be dramatic here. You may or may not know this. Ronald Acuna Jr. is very good at baseball. Very good at baseball. This game was over when Ronnie was on first base. There was a Charmin soft little base hit up the gap that ended in center field. Well, Ronnie, as he was rounding second, realized that the outfielders were not only playing deep, but were loafing, getting up to the ball. Ronnie turns second, looks as he peeks, and sees that they're still not at the ball, sprints to third, and realizes there's not a throw to home. So Ronald Acuna on a Charmin soft little bloop single to center field scores from first base. I was texting buddies of mine like 9 o'clock last night, like, I'm getting another dog just so I can name it Ronnie. That's how impressed I was with him last night. The Braves ended up with just 8 hits on the night, but they did go 5 of 11 with runners in scoring position, up over 40%, which is better than they've done all year long. These are the games that you look and you go, well, just why not this? Just why not this all the time? The team that played last night should be at 56, 57 wins instead of 44 and 55. The story of the night, though, was Drake Baldwin. He was in the DH role last night as Marcell Ozuna got sat. There was some speculation that Ozuna could end up on the way out from Atlanta. So they decided to let Sean Murphy get the start behind the dish. Drake Baldwin gets the nod as the DH. No big deal. Baldwin goes 3 for 5 with not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, but 6 RBIs. The man's a rookie. Last night was his 50th start in Major League Baseball. 6 RBIs. Drake Baldwin, the MVP of last night's performance. Let's get to item number 2. 2 stories out of the National Football League. Both of them are business related. Former NFL Players Association Executive Director Lloyd Howell Jr. has now resigned from both of his jobs. We told you last week that Lloyd Howell had resigned from his position as the Executive Director of the NFL Players Association. Why? Well, there were 2 primary reasons. The first of which was that he apparently, after some digging by the freaking FBI, because they got involved, apparently Lloyd Howell had taken a group of others. I don't know if they were players, executives, administrators. We don't know yet who it was. But he took them to a gentleman's club and spent on the company card north of $8,000. And in his accounting for that mucho dinero, wrote it down as player engagement. Well, I hope none of said players were engaged, because they probably had a bit of a fight when they got back from the strip club, which is where they took them. The other reason was a conflict of interest. Lloyd Howell II, Lloyd Howell Jr., was a part-time consultant for the Carlyle Group. Now, that in and of itself is not a bad problem, except for the fact that the Carlyle Group are currently active in trying to become owners. They're a hedge fund, become owners of 1 or more NFL teams. Remember, over the last couple of years, we have started to see Major League start to allow private investment firms, not a dude, but a investment firm, to buy in as minority owners of NFL teams. This group is one of them. He was consulting for a group of dudes trying to become owners while also trying to represent the players. The players found out. They started to give a pushback. He resigned from the NFLPA last week, and the Carlyle Group, although they did not define why, said yesterday that he has resigned there as well. My suspicion, he's probably going to be facing some sort of litigation down the line. The second business story in the NFL world is, once again, the President of the United States getting involved in sports business. Donald Trump said earlier this week that the Washington Commanders, I'm not going to do that anymore. because Jaden Daniels is a dog, Terry McLaurin is a dog, and Rob Brown's going to tell you right now, as he is currently in North Carolina, where sports gambling is legal, Rob Brown has taken out a ticket on the Washington Commanders at 8.5 to 1 to win the NFC East over the Philadelphia Eagles this year. Book it.
They don't like what they do.
That's where they're set up right now. Lonzo, what name have I been saying for 3 years this team should be? 3 years. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You want to change the name? Change the name. Back to the Washington football team. All right. There's our meeting ground. There's our compromise. The Washington football team was an elite all-time name, and I'm tired of people pretending like it wasn't. That's probably why I like it so much. It was also the most unique name in the NFL with great logos, great colors. It was fantastic, and everybody was covered up. Donald Trump said earlier in the week that if the team does not return itself to its historical moniker, that he may step in and prevent necessary funding for the Washington football team to get a new stadium in Washington, D.C. that they have been looking forward to for a very long time. And now the mayor of D.C. has gotten involved. The mayor of D.C., Muriel Bowser, has said that she remains confident the Commanders will return to the city. Remember, they currently play well outside of the District of Columbia. The goal with the new stadium is to get back to the borders of, hopefully inside, but at least not far away from the actual city of Washington, D.C. But Donald Trump said earlier in the week, if they do not go back to being called the old moniker, the OG moniker, then he may step in to prevent funding to the team to get that stadium in Washington, D.C. There is obviously a lot of controversy about that statement, depending on where you sit on the political spectrum about why now, why this, et cetera, et cetera. At the end of the day, it is a threat against an NFL franchise from the seated president of the United States of America. To me, that's 1,000% a sports story. My only question is, for the millions and millions, I can't yell, there's a lot of people of you who have lambasted the show over the past 4 years with keep your politics out of my sports. Are you bringing that same energy now? We're going to find out over the next few weeks. Let's wrap it up. I don't think so either. I think it's a distraction from some other political stories that we shan't address here on the sports show. Do you disagree? Do you think it's a legitimate thing that he's like super cares about?
A little bit going on with some of these trucks, but nothing to make.
I don't disagree.
Where you would not go at Hayes right now. You can go get that, or you can go get.
I didn't say definitively. I said I think it is. I didn't say this is what it is. I said I think it is. What do you want me to say? It is what it is. We may or may. You know what? I may be interested in coming back to that story and risking my entire broadcasting career. We'll see. Item number 3, the 2 race teams suing NASCAR over antitrust allegations filed for a temporary restraining order and preliminary injunction Monday to be recognized as charter organizations for the rest of the year. We know those 2 teams are 2311 Racing, that are owned by Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin, ergo 2311, and Front Row Motorsports, both locked in a lengthy legal battle with NASCAR over their charter system. And here's why this story, and I mean this story is freaking hilarious to me. The lawsuit by 2311 and Front Row Motorsports effectively accuses NASCAR of having a monopoly over the sport and therefore generating a world in which they can just do whatever they want whenever they want to do it, because no one can stop them. There's no oversight. There's no governing body. They are the governing and oversight body of themselves. And so 2311 and Front Row have said, yo, this isn't okay, because there's nowhere else for us to go. There's no competition. If we don't like what's being done here, it's not like we can go to a different circuit and race over there. This is all we got. So they filed a restraining order and injunction against NASCAR because they were set to lose their charters tomorrow. And the reports had already started circulating that NASCAR was ready to actively shop those charters around, as many as 6 of them, to other waiting teams. Well, yesterday it was announced that NASCAR has changed a long-standing rule, and that makes this very interesting. The rule that allegedly got changed yesterday by NASCAR, Jayski and a number of other outlets reported this. NASCAR has updated their rulebook to state that they can now limit race entries to 40 teams, with open teams based on owner standings. This would prevent 2311 and Front Row Motorsports from missing a race this year while the lawsuit continues on. So on one hand, it kind of feels like you would think this is an extension of an olive branch to Front Row in 2311. Hey, we have literally changed our rule book so that you guys, even if your charters get pulled, you can still race this year. You can finish your races, you can finish your season, whatever, except for to extend to the olive branch. What did they do? They literally changed their rule book with no oversight. They did exactly what the lawsuit is about. 2311 and Front Row have been saying in this lawsuit, NASCAR has the right to just change its rules, detrimental to whoever they want to be detrimental to, with no pushback at all, because there's no oversight and there's no competition. And in order to extend an olive branch to 2311 and Front Row Motorsports, they literally did the thing that the lawsuit accuses them of doing. So it benefits 2311 and Front Row in two ways. Number one, they get to race the rest of the year, even if they lose their charter. And number two, NASCAR just proved that their lawsuit is correct. What an incredible moment in sports. So incredible. Even though we are live at ACC Media Days, I'm coming back to this later on in the show. We are live at ACC Media Days in Charlotte, North Carolina, presented by our friends at Ingles. The Rob Brown Show is here on the Fan Upstate. Make sure you join us on our live stream. We are streaming all 4 hours of the show live, all 3 days that we are here at Southeastern Conference Media Days in Charlotte, North Carolina, courtesy of our friends at Ingles, our presenting sponsor. Low prices, love the savings at Ingles. We are streaming the show live all 3 days, all 4 hours of all 3 days, and all you need to do to come along for the ride is check out our social media pages, facebook.com/thefanupstate, on Twitter @thefanupstate, and of course the Fan Upstate's YouTube channel. The same with the Rob Brown Show. The Rob Brown Show on Facebook, the Rob Brown Show on YouTube, and the Rob Brown Show on Twitch. Do us a favor if you haven't already. Like and subscribe to all of those channels. Plus, if you've got to be audio only, if you're one of those people that has to have, like you have a job that you have to pay attention, ugh, gross, I know, you can stream the show, the audio version, live on the Odyssey app, AUDACY. It is for free. Go to your app store, grab the Odyssey app, it is free, heart the Fan Upstate's page, and listen to the show live and listen to the station live anytime that you want to with a data connection and a speaker. We go live on the Odyssey app 24/7, 365, all of our incredible programming. I will also tell you that on Thursday, we are debuting, and yes, we will do it even though we are here at ACC Media Days. On Thursday, we are debuting a new segment of the show. It is the Ray Memorial Hotline Take O the Week. Here's how you submit your take to end up having a segment built around you and your take. You go to the Odyssey app, you search and heart the Fan Upstate on the Odyssey app. There are 2 buttons in the middle of the page. One, listen live. Click that button, listen live. It's not that complicated, I believe in you. The second button says leave a voice message. You click on that button, and right into your phone, you can leave an up to 60-second voice note. It comes straight to me, and when it does, I can record it, I can edit it, I can play it back on the air, meaning you can say anything you want, whatever you want, 24/7, 365, bring the heat. You got a sports take? Bring it. You got a life take? Bring it. You got a hilarious anecdote? Bring it. You got a pop culture thought? Bring it. It is uncensored, unfiltered. Bring it on the Ray Memorial Hotline. Go to the Odyssey app, go to the Fan Upstate page, click on the Leave a Voice Message button, drop us an up to 60-second voice note, and if you are the Ray Memorial Hotline Take O the Week, we will play your voice note on Thursday's show, and Lonzo and I will react to it regardless of what it is about. So go to the Odyssey app, AUDACY. It is free on the App Store. Grab it, download it, go to the Fan Upstate's page, heart the page so it opens up immediately when you open the Odyssey app. Leave that voice note. The best voice note that I get between here and Thursday will be a segment on the show. It will be the Ray Memorial Hotline Take O the Week. Name subject to change, but I haven't come up with anything better as of yet. Do that now, and if you become the segment person on Thursday, I'll do my best to let you know so you can tune in. We will also post it as a standalone segment on our website as well. All right, let's get to some more stuff. We're going to talk quite a bit of Clemson in the next hour of the show, primarily because I do think we're going to go ahead and get the question marks out of the way. What are the pitfalls and the perils for the Clemson Tigers this year in the Atlantic Coast Conference? I've given you one already. We talked about LSU. We all know what that LSU game means in week number 1. Is the loser of that game dead? No, absolutely. But I do think that if Clemson loses that game, it'll be harder for them to get to the playoffs than it would be for LSU if LSU loses that game. You just don't have the resume after that game to necessarily stand on. Now, one of the best things that could happen for you, Clemson Tigers, would be if the ACC is better than I think it's going to be. One of the things that would be good for you is if I am correct about Georgia Tech, if Tony Elliott can get Virginia back and right, if Brent Pry comes off the hot seat at Virginia Tech, if Bill Belichick takes all the lessons he learned in the National Football League, applies them in Chapel Bill, and the Tar Heels are a good football team, if Jeff Brom takes Louisville to the next level, if Manny Diaz is able to take the best recruiting class Duke's had since Steve Spurrier was there and make it something, if all these teams are the best they can be, that would be spectacular for Clemson, because then the resume looks more solid. And if you lose to that LSU team, you may need it. You've got LSU, you've got SMU in the middle of the season, and you've got South Carolina at the end. I think Georgia Tech's going to be good. Maybe Georgia Tech is a resume builder, but you can't plan on that yet. So that's what I'm looking at as far as the result of the LSU game. But of course, what's out there for the rest of this team? What's out there for the rest of the schedule? Are there trap games? Are there danger zones? Is there a road game that sticks out? I got a couple of them I am very interested in. So let's run to a break. When we come back here in just a moment from right now, it's not going to be your standard, here's who they play, when, and where. We're going to look up and down the schedule, but we are going to mark the most dangerous games on the schedule for Clemson, look at the teams that make them dangerous, and see what impact a win and loss in each might end up having. My name is Rob Brown, the Great Alonzo, back in the network studio. The Odyssey app is free. Stream the show live. Leave that voice message to be Thursday's Ray Memorial Hotline Take O the Week. The Clemson schedule of danger is up next on the Rob Brown Show on the Fan Upstate.
actually slept like longer than I normally do. Dude, those beds soft.
Yeah.
Man, that's fantastic.
That last shot I just picked up that. That's good.
All right, so you have to say Martinez out.
I was just waiting for her to say like any hit on me or like he tried to pick me up or take me out.
So, two things. Number one, during the break, I ran up to the restroom, which is it's a mild hike away to get there. We're down on the bottom floor of the Hilton Uptown in Charlotte, North Carolina, live for ACC Media Days for the next 3 days. Ran up to the restroom, and today's list of teams includes the Miami Hurricanes. And while I was up there, there is a room kind of off to the back that is just for the coaches and players that are representing their teams today. There is a room out to the side that represents, that is just for players and coaches. And I was standing at the door because that room is right next to where the restrooms are. And as I was walking into the restroom, I popped a look inside. The door was open. I'm not a creeper. I popped a look inside that room, and grabbing a fresh cup of Joe was Carson Beck, the new starting quarterback for the Miami Hurricanes. And I have a couple of takeaways. Number one, this dude's surprisingly big. Like, I knew he was a tall guy. He's like a surprisingly tall human being. I'm saying that dude's probably checking in. And again, I don't know if my man had on like the tall dress shoes. Right? I know there are some dudes that like to wear dress shoes with some oomph to the heel to give themselves a little bit of a boost. I don't know. I don't necessarily think he was. Dude was looking down at me when we were 4 or 5 feet away from each other. He was kind of up against the wall grabbing a coffee. Number one, that dude's tall, like surprisingly tall for I guess for what I shouldn't say for a college football quarterback. A lot of them are tall now, but like surprisingly tall. Like he had that Peyton Manning vibe and build to him. The second thing I will say this, and for those of you that will check into the ACC network over the next couple of days, specifically today is the day that Carson Beck, Mario Cristobal, and the rest of the Miami Hurricanes will be speaking. Lonzo, I'm going to say that in the four years that I've done this event, because we did it the first year I was here. We did not do it the first year I was here because it was COVID year, and they did not do this event during the COVID lockdown, but we've done it every other year. So this is the fourth. In the years that I've been doing this event, in the one Southeastern Conference event that I've done so far, what's up, big dog? I got to say, Carson Beck might have the best suit. Like the players put a lot of pride into the suits that they are rocking. Carson Beck's suit, and I've said before, man, I can't stand him. I say that because there's a former player like 5 feet from me, and I don't want to get my ass whipped on the floor of the Hilton. I can't stand him. Carson Beck has got a well-fit, well-tailored, custom Miami green suit on this morning, and when I turned the corner, I was like, damn, dog, you look good. You look real good. That's a great vibe. That's a great look. No, it's not camo. It's just Miami green. It's solid green, but it's got like a little bit. You know what it is? I think you've seen it in person. So it's the same kind of like texture as my wedding suit was, like just a little bit of shine to make it stand out, but not like shiny. You know what I mean? Like it's got just a little glare, but like not enough where you're like, oh, that dude's obnoxious. But it's that dark Kelly Miami green. I was like, bro, that's a whole vibe. That's a good look. I wish I could pull that off. Yes, it's like an Army man green, but it's got just enough shine to like catch the attention, but not enough to be like, look at me over everyone else. It's a good look. It's a good look for Carson Beck, starting quarterback this year of the Miami Hurricanes. All right, here's what I promised you we would do in this segment, and as Lonzo can attest, we have never once teased a segment and not gotten to it. So let's do that. Not one time. Let's take a look at the Clemson schedule this year. And I don't want to do just the regular, everyday, ordinary run-of-the-mill breakdown and say, well, here's who they play, and here's the date, and here's the venue. I actually want to look and analyze what games are dangerous. Because the more I look at this schedule, great one, and I acknowledge that I am doing this, and I want to look at this schedule because I do think it is important that Los Tigres do this. I want to look at this schedule through the prism of every team that they play will be the best version that they are capable of being. And that's not saying, okay, if they play every team and every team is undefeated. No, I don't think that's the case. I'm saying if every team reaches what we think is the upper echelon of what they are capable of, what does this schedule look like? We all know what LSU is in week number 1. This is, and I am being sincere when I say it, this is one of 2 possible national championship previews in week 1. Texas Ohio State is one of them. LSU Clemson is one of them. I think both of the Death Valley oriented Tigers are championship material. Now, we can look at this and we can say, okay, LSU, Brian Kelly, a lot of question marks. Is he the guy, or is he going to get kicked out of the family this year? Can LSU, is Garrett Nussmeier up to the expectations? I have questions about Garrett Nussmeier as much as anybody else in the Southeastern Conference this year. And I think all those are fair. I think it is fair to think that LSU, I think LSU is probably a 9-3 team this year. I think it buys Brian Kelly one more year, but I think they've got to, if not be in the playoffs, they've got to be like the first team out if he's going to keep his job. So I'm going to work on the assumption right now because, again, for the sake of this breakdown, we're going to assume everybody reaches the best version of themselves. The best version of themselves for LSU is a team that was picked, I believe, 4th to win the SEC by the media. So let's say that they're a 10-2-ish football team. That game is dangerous. Clemson favored by a field goal at the crib. You get a field goal for being at the crib. It's a pick'em game for LSU and Clemson. Clemson's got to be the best version of itself right out of the gate. There is no warm-up. There is no tune-up. There is no Troy in week 1. That's week 2. That's a very winnable game for Clemson. What happens if they lose that game? Here's the good news. If every team reaches the highest of potential, I've said a couple of times, Clemson doesn't have the resume building schedule that LSU has after that game. I believe that is true. But here's what I am going to say looking at this schedule. You got Troy in week 2. You're at Georgia Tech week 3. You all have heard how complimentary I have been of Brent Key and the Georgia Tech Rambling Road. That is a team that I think could realistically be a 9-3 football team this year. That could be a resume booster for Clemson. Week after that, you got Syracuse. A lot of turmoil at Syracuse, a lot of turnover at Syracuse. A lot of guys went out, new head coach, a lot of questions about Syracuse. Then you're at North Carolina. Now, I think North Carolina is going to be a disaster this year. But for the concept of the conversation, let's say that Lonzo's correct about North Carolina. Let's say that Bill Belichick has an ability to take everything that he learned at the NFL level and was the most successul head coach of all time, whether or not you want to give him the credit, Brady the credit, split the credit, whatever, doesn't matter. Let's say he takes all the lessons he learned at New England, and he brings it to North Carolina, and North Carolina is another team that is a 9-3 team. I don't think they have the talent to be a 10-2, 11-1 team, but let's say they hit the best they can be, and let's say that's around 9-3. That game, to me, great one, kind of starts to feel like a bit of a sleeper game for Clemson because it comes after Syracuse. It's before a road trip to Boston College. Now, I don't know that Boston College is going to make Clemson the red bandana game. I don't know that they've announced it. I should have looked it up during the break. I was busy. I didn't. But I'm going to honestly kind of assume that they are because I think that is the biggest home game that Boston College has on the docket this year. And those are exactly the type of games that Boston College likes to make into those red bandana games to give themselves a little bit of extra oomph to get there. So Boston College, let's say that is that red bandana game. And now, they do have Notre Dame coming to the crib, I think 3 or 4 weeks after that. So maybe that's the game because you got the Catholics be the Catholics, the gold helmets versus the gold helmets. Maybe that's it. I don't know. But you know they're going to be up for that game. That makes North Carolina a little bit of a sleeper game. Now, I will say this.
You're on Atlanta Braves today.
1,000% it is.
Let's play that ball that we played about him being colored.
I completely concur. And I will say this. While it is a sleeper game, I also think that in watching the conversations and hearing the conversations, et cetera, I don't think Dabo's going to have a Clemson Tiger team unprepared for Bill Belichick, right? And I think Bill Belichick has been so big for so long that I think, and I could be wrong, But I think that Dabo Swinney it has enough guys in that locker room who, even if they were youngsters, if they were Utiana, they are aware of who Bill Belichick is and what Bill Belichick has accomplished and the pedigree, the coaching pedigree that he brings into this conversation. I don't think this is a game where Clemson gets caught asleep at the wheel. I think that this is a game they will be up and ready and prepared for. It doesn't make it less dangerous. Then they're at Boston College the very next week. That makes BC dangerous, especially if BC makes it the Red Bandana Day. You know that whatever reason, that brings out the best in that team. I think Clemson's way the better team. I'm just saying, if you get so wrapped up in Bill Belichick, and then more importantly, who do they have the week after they're at Boston College? Brett Lashley, Kevin Jennings, and the Smooth Stanks come to town the week after that. That's a game to me, great one, that if you are super wrapped up in the hoodie and you got your other eye turned towards last year's ACC championship game opponent, the SMU Mustangs, that Boston College road trip wedged right there in the middle smells like a massive upset spot if you are Clemson. Because you're dialed in on Bill, you're dialed in on not getting got by the team that damn near got you in the title game last year, and you got BC in a roadie. And you know BC, like, as much of a small school as it is, I've not been to a football game there, but I've watched a lot of them on TV. Boston College, not the biggest or best fan base in the world, but they pack it the hell out for games like this one. I'm not saying it's even close to the most difficult road game that Clemson will have this year, but if you're looking at the hoodie 1 week and you're looking 2 weeks ahead to last year's ACC championship game opponent to SMU, that Boston College game wedged right in the middle kind of starts to feel like a classic trap game. SMU, I'll add one more because you are 100% correct, but I'll take him one step further. And again, we are analyzing the schedule with the paradigm that everybody's the best that we like hits the roof. Everybody in the conference hits the roof. Not only do they have SMU, but the week after that, coming to the crib is the Duke Blue Devils. If they get dialed into SMU and it turns out to be a game similar to what it was last year, an emotionally exhaustive physical football game with SMU, who do want to be a very physical football game this year, that next game could be super interesting because this is the best Duke team, talent-wise, that maybe they've ever had. I don't think Manny Diaz is Mike Elko. I don't think he's in that department. I don't think he's in that same coaching stratosphere. But I do think this is a head coach that has gotten great talent, that has developed great talent, and more importantly, that has talent that will go to war for their head coach. And then they got Duke. And then who do they have the week after that? Again, this is a team that I find dangerous for everybody they play. The Florida State Seminoles. Mike Norvell did not go all portal guys this year. He went back to high school recruiting, not as heavily as he has in years gone by, or not as heavily as Florida State did in years gone by. It's about a 50-50 split. But he did bring a lot of young, good 5-star, 4-star talent. And he did bring in a portal class that feels like a different breed. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll find out. Last year's class felt like it was a damn good class too. But you got Florida State, who wants to rebound. And I've told you, I think if Florida State hits peak, they're 8-4. Like maybe there's a fight to 9-3, but I think they can be an 8-4 team. Then you got Louisville on the road. You're going to Jeff Brom's house. Again, this ain't the Louisville team that it was when Lamar Jackson was there a handful of years ago, but it's not a bad team either. It's a well-coached team, and there is talent there for Louisville. I'm going to say this, Lonzo, about that entire stretch. The Georgia Tech game, you are fortunate in the Georgia Tech game that you've got Troy the week before that, and you've got Syracuse, who I do not think is going to be in the mix the week after that. So you can kind of dial in on Brent Key and the Ramblin' Wreck, which is just a different breed of football. But then you've got at North Carolina, at Boston College, SMU, Duke, Florida State, and Louisville. All of those teams, Clemson's better than all of those teams. Undisputedly, undoubtedly. They are better than all those teams individually. But when you stack, dial in on the hoodie, maybe a sleeper game against Boston College on the road because you're looking ahead to SMU. Then you got the best Duke team there's ever been coming to your house. Then you got a Florida State team that is hell-bent on resurrecting themselves after a 2-10 season last year. Then you got to go to Jeff Brom's house. I have gone from, Clemson's like just cakewalk the schedule, right, to that little stretch of 6 consecutive ACC games right there. There's 2, maybe 3 trap games in there. that could be dangerous for Clemson if they are not clicking on all cylinders.
That's a quadruple beat.
Also fair. Also fair. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back here in just a minute from right now, we started earlier in the show looking at all of the biggest questions and setting the narrative about every team in the ACC. We pick up with that conversation. We'll come back to Clemson a little bit later on in the show, but the biggest narratives and storylines in this conference, we talk about them next as we are live at ACC Media Days through Thursday, presented by our friends at Ingles. We appreciate them buying in. We appreciate you listening. We appreciate Lonzo for his sports flash.
I'm seeing sleight of hand, just something for Nell, something where Thurston Profar leads off medals in his second run. Junior is third. The conversation that's kind of gone on for a while about probably junior better for the Braves not leading off, where he could possibly have a 2-run homer or 3-run homer his first at bat instead of a solo shot that leading off. field, out to the mound. It will be a 7:15 first pitch for the leadoff show. Time 6 o'clock, and we'll see if the bats continue to help out our pitchers as they have.
Yeah, baby. The Rob Brown Show back on your radio. It is the Fan Upstate. Rob Brown, the great one, Lonzo, back in the network studio. 3 days of all the college football talk that you can handle, my dudes and dudettes, as we are live at ACC Media Days here in Charlotte, North Carolina, the site of this year's 2025 Atlantic Coast Conference Media Days. It is going to be an interesting 3 days, and I will say this, great one. I feel like to some degree a bit of a challenge has been laid down because down here, I'm down on Media Row, down here on Radio Row, and there's I'm somewhere in the neighborhood of like 40 radio stations, television stations that are set up in the area, right? And we're all kind of right around each other. The other stations in our market are right here to my right. WFNZ Charlotte is over to my left. There are stations out of Southern Methodist and out of Tallahassee, and there's a station out of Atlanta, 980, right in front of me. There's stations from all over the ACC footprint here. ESPN Radio in Richmond. There's a lot around here. And most of the tables are set up the way that we set up, right? Like you got your Comrex, which is the equipment that we use to send our signal back to the studio. You got mics and headsets. You got little signs. Some of us have webcams set up. And pretty standard stuff. But over in the corner, there is I don't know if it's a station or a network or a podcast or whatever. There is a group over there, that on top of their table, they have about a 32-inch television flat screen set up on a stand. And rigged up to that is an Xbox One with EA Sports College Football 26 plugged up and running. And so during the break a couple of segments ago, I went over and I chatted with one of the guys who runs this. I know him from this event. We've been coming to this event for, I think this is the 4th consecutive year that we have come to this event. It's, one of these events are kind of media reunions for us as much as they are to cover the event itself. So I went over and talked to one of the guys who runs the event for that outlet, and I was like, "Yo, what do we got going on here? You're gonna kill some time between segments or what?" And he goes, "No, we're actually trying something different this year." And I said, "What's that?" And he said that as we get players coming through, we requested to do the interviews in tandem. And I said, "Really? Why is that?" And he said, "Because we're going to do the interviews while they play EA Sports College Football 2026. We're going to talk to them while they play as their own team in EA Sports College Football 2026. They set up the game to be 4 3-minute quarters, which is, you can expedite games by having like 3-minute quarters, 5-minute quarters, whatever. So you can play shorter games. You don't have to play a whole football game. We are going to set them up to play 4 3-minute quarters while they do a 15-minute interview with us, and they are going to play as themselves in the game while they do their interview with us." And I am watching now. This outlet covers the Miami Hurricanes, and I'm looking right over, and they have a couple of, it's not Carson Beck, but they have a couple of the Miami Hurricanes over there right now that just sat down to do their first couple of radio interviews. And they quite literally have two, a Miami offensive and defensive lineman, playing as themselves in EA Sports College, playing as the Hurricanes in EA Sports College Football 2026 while they do their interview. And that is actually one of the coolest ideas I've ever seen anybody try out. Yeah.
Quarterback should have a grip because he chooses the right guy. But now Miami, they get their hands on a guy who's got SEC field general experience, and now get to bring that to ACC this season.
You talk about guys that play
Yeah, I think so.
Carson Jackson guy. I mean, the only thing he missed was being in the college football playoffs. Would have had he not been hurt.
I have said for many years, and you guys know this if you follow the show. I don't think I have to say it. I think you can just hear it. My goal whenever we interview somebody is to disarm them, because especially younger guys, right? Especially high school players, college players who maybe haven't gotten a ton of media training, maybe they aren't super media savvy yet. A lot of them have a mindset of how they are supposed to sound, how they are supposed to talk. They lean into the football cliches, and that's all fine. Like that's part of the growing up. And then there are other guys, even older guys, who they don't want to be personal. They don't want to be personable. They don't want to be. They just want to be football guys. And it's always been a methodology for me of disarm them, asking questions about themselves, like get people to open up as people, because even if you are talking to them about football, whether it is their football team or them as a player or a coach or whatever, the interviews are always better if that person is that person and not a robotic version of it. And I will tell you, anybody who's 40 years old and was ever in an original Call of Duty Xbox public lobby back in the day, back before they had like the safety and security filters on them, you know you are going to get the most unbridled version of somebody when they are elbow deep in a multiplayer video game. They're going to say things about your mama and your dog that'll make you want to drive across the country to whoop somebody's behind. I love it. I think it's a great idea. That might be something I'm looking to do it next year. That's fantastic. All right. We are live at ACC Media Days for the next 3 days here in Charlotte, North Carolina, presented by our title sponsor, Ingles. Low prices, love the savings. We are very, very grateful to Ingles for partnering with us to make this event happen. One of the things we are doing today for day one is I think it is important for us to really take a few minutes to take stock of this conference, what it is, team to team, top to bottom, the goodness and the badness, and really get a vibe for where every team in this conference is. Back in hour number one, we ran through Boston College, Cal, we ran through Duke, Florida State, and Georgia Tech. In hour number two, we talked a lot about your Clemson Tigers. In hour four, we'll circle back around to Clemson. But I do want to take the rest of this hour to discuss the rest of the conference, to talk about the rest of the teams that may or may not be competition for the Clemson Tigers when the season is over, assuming that Clemson is the best team in this conference, as I assume on Thursday or Friday we will find out that the media has prognosticated to be the case. Let's go next to the Louisville Cardinals. The Cardinals kind of taking the 2023 FSU model of recruiting. They laid into the transfer portal. They wanted a bunch of ready-to-play guys, which makes sense because they feel like they've got a good combination of skill position talent. They wanted to build around it and win immediately. A lot of college football moving forward, and I do think that, whether it's Dabo Swinney, Mike Norvell, Jeff Brom, anybody, I think you will see strategy as far as the portal and high school recruiting vary year to year, program to program. Because there may be years where you look and you go, okay, we've got a transformational quarterback this year, but he's also got 1 year left. We got to build around this guy. We got to make a run with this guy. Now, again, this is one of the reasons that I was intrigued in what South Carolina did in the transfer portal this year, because you have 1 more year with Lenora Sellers. Lenora Sellers is going to the NFL next year. That is not a question mark to me. That is a statement of fact. I think Lenora Sellers is going to the National Football League next year. So South Carolina has effectively 1 year to play for a title with a dude who may very well go down as the best quarterback to ever lace him up in Columbia, South Carolina. Louisville's kind of in that mark. They went with a bunch of transfer portal guys. They only brought in 16 high school signees. Only 1 4-star in that group. High edge C.J. May comes over in the portal. The line of scrimmage kind of a focal point. They brought in 6 offensive linemen and 5 defensive linemen amongst the incoming transfer portal players did the Louisville Cardinals. The Cardinals went 9-4 last year, including a win over Washington by a point in the bowl game. But this was also a team that result felt to some degree I think, underwhelming last year. They did get 3 wins out of the gate with Austin Peay, Jacksonville State, and they did get a win over a Georgia Tech team that was finding its way a little bit. I don't think Georgia Tech really developed into the best version of themselves until the middle of the year. And then, of course, because of the injuries to Jamal Haynes and Haynes King, they kind of fell off. But after that loss, or after that win over Georgia Tech, they lost to Notre Dame. They lost to SMU. They beat Virginia. They lost to Miami. Boston College and at Clemson were wins, but then they turned around after the Clemson win, and at that point it felt like, hey, maybe this team could be a 9-3 football team. They turned around and they gave one back to Stanford as well. So regular season 8-4, but their 4 losses, all of them one-score losses, a total of 24 combined points. And this team, as we mentioned, spent a lot of time building up depth. They went and got former NC State wide receiver Dakari Collins on the outside, which gives Louisville a 6'4" jump ball receiver that they just did not have last year. Defensive line, they lost all 4 starters, and on the other side, lost the tight end. They added effectively 3 portal transfers for every one of those 5 positions this offseason. It feels to me like Louisville decided, let's play the law of averages this year. We feel like we're going to stumble into a portal player at each of these players that is going to live up to the standard this year. There are some names that make their return this year. There are some names that are very interesting. Miller Moss is the quarterback. You've heard that name. He transfers over from USC, 372 yards and 6 touchdowns in the Holiday Bowl over the Cardinals, 42-28 at the end of Brom's first season at Louisville. Started 9 games last year, threw for over 2,500 yards and 18 scores, but did have a 3-interception game late in the season that cost him his starting job at USC. He hit the portal before Christmas last year. They do have Chris Bell, 43 catches, 737 yards and 4 touchdowns, and 6-year senior Colin Lacey, who missed most of last season with injuries after catching 208 passes in 4 years at South Alabama. So they stocked the wide receiver room with portal guys. None of them necessarily jump off the page as that's a great pickup. All of them that felt like they were very close with less talent as quarterback. This Louisville team, again, we talked about the schedule for Clemson. It's in a very interesting place for the Tigers this year. They are at the end of a 6-game SEC or ACC stretch, coming off of SMU, Duke, and Florida State. Home for Clemson. Then for the first time in 4 weeks, they got to leave to go up to Kentucky to take on the Cardinals. That's a danger zone spot for me. Before we get to the break, let's get to the Miami Hurricanes. We all know, or at least a lot of us feel like, Carson Beck is kind of the key here. Georgia transfer over from the Bulldogs. He comes down after leading the Dogs to a lot of success, including an SEC championship game. But they also signed 21 high school players, including a couple of 5-stars out of the portal. Good news for Miami. 10 wins last year for the second time since the early 2000s. The bad news is that the month of November was not great for Miami last year. You had the 23-28 loss to Georgia Tech. That was a loss for which there is no excuse. We have hammered it and hammered it and hammered it. They blew that game. There's no other way to say it. That game was done, over, take a knee, win the football game. It's all you got to do, and they blew that. They also had that end-of-season loss, 38-42, to the Syracuse Orange. How many times have we said in that game, Miami wins that game to go to the playoffs? It's not a question mark. That's a statement of fact. They win that game, they go to the playoffs, but they found a way to blow that one up as well. I don't know what to tell you about this team. There were blown leads throughout the course of the season. Some of them they fought back and won in the fourth quarter. Some of them they did not. I think this team has more talent this year than it had last year, and the question mark is going to be, can Carson Beck, who had a 24-3 record as a starter for Georgia that had him in a position for a playoff run last year before that elbow injury in the SEC title game that kept him out of the postseason, he's supposedly, hopefully, going to be ready to take over as QB1. But the question marks are, who's he going to throw to? They got 2 returnees in receptions in running back Mark Fletcher. He had 10. Tight end Elijah Lofton with 9. That's their top 2 guys. The top two returning pass catchers for Miami are guys who caught 10 footballs and 9 footballs for that offense last year. Now, they did bring in some guys from the portal. C.J. Daniels spent 4 seasons at Liberty. He went to LSU for a season. His final year, his COVID year, is with Miami this year. 2,400 yards, 21 touchdowns in his career. But most of those came from his time at Liberty. This is a step up in competition for him. Ray Joseph, limited experience, going to be a starter this year. Jordan Lyle, 402 yards as a true freshman, including a 91-yard touchdown against South Florida in the wide receiver position. Probably the most experienced overall in the Miami offense. But here is the good news for the Hurricanes. They return starters Matthew McCoy, Inez Cooper, and Francis Mauga, plus transfers James Brockermeyer, who started at TCU, and Markel Bell, who logged 5 starts for Miami last year across the offensive line. They've got 4 returning starters and a guy who transfers over from being a starter at TCU. I will put it this way, and I don't know what else or how else to put it. If Miami doesn't get it done this year, Mario Cristobal, that's just where I'm landing. If they don't get it done this year, I don't think they get it done in the current setup. The money is there. The resources are there. The NIL is there. Miami is as attractive of a portal destination as anybody in college football. I have been to South Beach. I'm going to tell you right now, 40-year-old Rob Brown, not on South Beach for me. All right? Unfortunately, I'm just too old for that. 18-year-old Rob Brown, 19-year-old, 20, 21-year-old Rob Brown. I'd have lived in South Beach and never thought once about it. The place is incredible. All right? The bars, the nightclubs, the cars, the ladies. South Beach is an incredible place. And they got oodles and oodles of booster money and NIL money available. It is an A-tier, a top-notch, a top-tier transfer portal destination. And they've shown that in the portal this year, along with returners, at least across the offensive and defensive line. And if that is the case, I mean it when I say, if Miami can't get it done this year, and I am including with Clemson being what Clemson is expected to be this year. If Miami can't get it done this year, I think they gotta bomb it and reset. Honestly, I just don't think it's because it feels to me as if with the talent that they have and with Miami, Notre Dame, Bethune-Cookman, South Florida, Florida State, Louisville, Stanford, SMU, Syracuse, NC State, Virginia Tech, Pittsburgh. There is on that schedule, there are 2 games that Miami might, not should, might be an underdog. They might be an underdog to Notre Dame, and they might be an underdog to Florida. By the way, both of those games are in South Beach this year. Both of those games are at Miami. The only rivalry games that they have to be concerned about on the road are at Florida State October 4th and at SMU on November 1st. And I'll say right now, with the talent on paper they have, the Miami Hurricanes should be better than SMU. They should win that game on the road. All right, we'll talk more about some of the other teams coming up. We got North Carolina, NC State, Pitt, and SMU to knock out. Final hour, we'll do Stanford, Syracuse, Virginia Tech, and Wake Forest. We'll skip back around and talk about how these teams match up with Clemson and more. The Rob Brown Show is on your radio live from ACC Media Days here in Charlotte, North Carolina, presented by Ingles. This is the Fan Upstate. All right, guys, in the chat, y'all stay right there. We'll be right back. The Rob Brown Show back on your radio. It is the Fan Upstate live from ACC Media Days here in Charlotte, North Carolina. We will be taking you all the way till 10 a.m. today. Right after that, I will be headed upstairs where the commissioner of the conference, Jim Phillips, is giving an address coming up here in about half an hour from now. I will effort us being able to pipe that audio in and give a listen to what Jim Phillips has to say, and we will react and respond to that again, hopefully, if I can get the tech to work in real time. But as of right now, we are taking a spin around all 17 teams that will play football under the ACC banner this year. I think it is, for me anyway, important as we are covering the Clemson Tigers, obviously, to have a good look at everybody who is, might be, could turn out to be competition in this conference down the line. We left off with Miami. Now let's get to the University of North Carolina. We all know the big storyline for the Tar Heels of UNC, and that, of course, is the hiring of Bill Belichick. One of the results of keeping Bill Belichick was keeping four-star quarterback Bryce Baker out of North Carolina in the class. He was getting a lot of attention. There is thought that Bryce Baker will not start this year at QB1. The expectation is that he will likely be QB2 to start behind Gio Lopez, a 6 foot, 220-pound sophomore, but that Baker will likely inherit the position when Bill Belichick feels that he is ready. The Heels also went hard in adding depth to the program with a bunch of January and February commitments. You know, we've been talking about some of the classes in the ACC that are 18, 19 players, a few that are 22, 23 players. The Tar Heels added 29 high school players along with 19 transfers, including former Penn State backup defensive lineman Smith Bilbert, who will be added to the lineup this year. Obviously, quarterback remains the key position. We just told you about the thought that Gio Lopez, who is a transfer quarterback from South Alabama, would get the nod. Also, keep in mind, Max Johnson is also on this list. The son of former Super Bowl champion Brad Johnson. He was at LSU for a while, ended up transferring out now at North Carolina. And then we mentioned Bryce Baker, the recruit, the four-star, who may or may not find his way into a starting role down the line. They lose Amari Hampton. I've told you all the way through the NFL draft. Amari Hampton is my favorite pick of round one to be the surprise breakout player in the league next year. I think that Jim Harbaugh, as much as he has said with the Chargers, we're a run-first team, we're going to run the hell out of the football. Amari Hampton, they drafted him for that exact reason, but the Chargers' gain is the Tar Heels' loss. So what is the running game going to look like for North Carolina? They bring back sophomore Davion Goss, who gained 343 yards, but averaged 4.9 yards per carry, backing up Hampton last year. They also have, should Bill Belichick elect to play a more pro style of offense, they also have Benjamin Hall, who is a kind of a fullback running back hybrid. He's a big bowling ball of a running back, but he's also got good acceleration out of the backfield, is expected to get a healthy number of totes, especially in short yardage situations. Kobe Paysour, another potential standout at the wide receivers position. This guy has had 3 different foot surgeries. If you look at the numbers, they trend up, he gets hurt. They trend up, he gets hurt. Hopefully with a new training staff, hopefully with a new coaching staff, they'll understand how to limit that on the defensive side of the ball. Steve Belichick comes over from Washington, the son of Bill. Obviously, he was the DC there last year, but revamping the defense this year is going to be tough. Bo Atkinson, starting linebacker, left. He is now a member of Ohio State. Linebacker Amari Campbell entered the portal as well. You've got as many as 8 transfers in who are likely to be starters this year. Kamori House comes from Washington. DeAndre Robinson comes from Florida. Mekhi Gaber comes over from Nebraska. The overriding theme for this season, though, for me, is just going to be what is, at least it feels like, the most NFL-like program in college football. What's that transfer to? What does that translate to? What does that end up looking like? Again, I've had the conversation. I am fully on board with the belief that Bill Belichick didn't win New England Super Bowls, Tom Brady did. Bill Belichick's theory, and I don't even think this is a theory. He said it before, Brady said it before. The Belichickian way at New England was to tell a locker room full of NFL players, if you have an issue with 12, you're gone. We don't care. Everything revolves around that guy. They don't have a Tom Brady in this locker room at quarterback. They got 3 guys that all feel like they have upside, but none of them are standalone breakout guys. So they are running their program. North Carolina was one of the first teams after the hiring of Belichick that immediately said, we got a GM now. Like, we have a general manager. Bill doesn't have to deal with NIL and handling agents and all that. We got a dude who's going to do that. We just want Bill to talk about football. We also know all of the attention that went to his girlfriend all year. Yes, I know it's boring and lame and whatever, but to say it's a non-story, I think is just respectfully incorrect this year. North Carolina opens with TCU. Not a TCU team like they were back in the Gary Patterson days, but still a decent team. Charlotte, Richmond at UCF to get through week 4, and then the ACC slate begins. And it begins with a road trip to Clemson, North Carolina to take on Dabo Swinney and the Tigers. That game's got to be circled in red. It just does. Because if Lonzo's right and Bill Belichick translates to success, whatever your definition of success is in Chapel Hill, then that game's very dangerous for Clemson. But if that's really the first big test for the North Carolina Tar Heels and they get waxed by 40, all of the hype around Bill could come crumbling down relatively quickly. After Clemson, they're at Cal, back home for Virginia, on the road at Syracuse, back home for Stanford, at Wake Forest, back home for the rivalry game against Duke, and they wrap it up with the rivalry game against NC State. After the Clemson game, it is home away for the rest of the ride for the Tar Heels of North Carolina. NC State Wolfpack did not spend a lot of time recruiting in state. They signed 22 high school signees, but only 3 of them came from North Carolina. Georgia and Ohio ended up with 3 on this roster as well. 7 Wolfpack members came from Florida, the biggest get landing Louisville 4-star offensive lineman Spike Souls. North Carolina State is another very interesting team. They look forward to seeing CJ Bailey for a full season at quarterback. We all know after Grayson McCall had that series of concussions that knocked him out of football as a whole. Bailey came in a 6'6" starter who went 2,413 yards across just 9 games, 17 tutties, 10 picks, netted 279 rushing yards with 3 touchdowns. They also bring back Justin Jolly at tight end, a team high 661 yards on 43 receptions, ranked 2nd on the team in both categories last year. Noah Rogers, 478 on 35 at the wide receiver spot, will be their most experienced guy, but they also have Wesley Grimes back. Grimes was a transfer over from NC State last year, has now been in the offense, been in the system for a full season. They plan on leaning on him. The offensive line does have to restructure for the Wolfpack as a whole, and they did change offensive coordinators, remember. Robert Anae was the OC, a frustratingly inconsistent season for the Wolfpack last year, who had streaks of wins and losses, streaks of scores in the 40s, and then streaks of scores in the single digits and the teens. So he made the change, decided to bring over Kurt Roper. Kurt Roper is a name that South Carolina fans will know because he did spend a limited amount of time as the Gamecocks offensive coordinator, also was an OC at Duke and Florida as well. So he does have some experience at the highest level. Listen, this team had a losing record last year of 6-7, but it was the first losing record in 5 years. The Wolfpack's looking for a bounce back in 12 years under Dave Doran. They followed their 2 other losing campaigns with 8-win campaigns the following year. They will get the opportunity to avenge their loss against ECU in the Military Bowl because East Carolina is their opener this year, the early schedule: Virginia at Wake, at Duke, Virginia Tech, and Campbell. Really, the only game that looks like a big challenge out of the gate is going to Duke under Manny Diaz. Yes, I do think that team is going to be better this year, not good, but better. Then they're at Notre Dame, at Pitt, Georgia Tech, Miami, Florida State, and North Carolina to wrap it up. A brutal back half of the schedule for the Wolfpack. Can they get to that 8 wins for the 3rd time under Dave Doran after coming off of a losing year? When we come back, we will take a look at Pitt, SMU, and Stanford in the final hour of the show. Syracuse, Virginia, Virginia Tech, and Wake, as well as checking in on the press conference of Commissioner Jim Phillips. That's all coming up on the Rob Brown Show, live from ACC Media Days, presented by our friends at Ingles Supermarkets. This is the Fan Upstate. The Rob Brown Show on your radio, live from ACC Media Days here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Make sure you join our live stream at facebook.com/TheFanUpstate. The Fan Upstate on Twitter or on YouTube. Search, subscribe, do all the good millennial button mashing that you are supposed to do. Please do the same thing for The Rob Brown Show. Follow me on Twitter at The Rob Brown Show. Watch the stream live at The Rob Brown Show on Facebook and at The Rob Brown Show on YouTube. If you haven't done so already, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. We have been, over the past couple of weeks, making an extra effort to put up some different social media clips from the show and segments, etc., etc. Had a TikTok where I'm at The Rob Brown Show. Had a TikTok making fun of Texas A&M. Do about 19,000 views last week live from SEC Media Days. I tell you that for no other reason than to say that I made fun of Texas A&M on TikTok and it got a lot of attention. I showed it to the lines. I thought it was funny.
All right, cool.
That Texas A&M's a cult. It's kind of like me saying, that Brad Pitt's an attractive person. Like some things are just obvious by looking at them. I don't really need to go into the detail. Just look. It's pretty good. At The Rob Brown Show on TikTok, as well as Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We are going through here in the third hour of our first day at ACC Media Days in Charlotte, North Carolina. We are going through all 17 teams that will play football under the Atlantic Coast Conference banner this year. Why? Because I would like to make sure that we all have a relatively solid overview of the conference at large, so that as we break down Clemson, Miami, SMU, the teams that we believe truly are national championship and certainly Atlantic Coast Conference championship contenders, Mick, we have a good idea of what they have to go through to get there. We left off at North Carolina State. Now let's go to Pittsburgh. This is a scary year if you are Pat Narduzzi, because I do think that the leash is getting progressively shorter for a man who has led into some of its best football seasons in recent memory. I think they could be en route to some problematic football this year. Recruiting locally, not the way Pittsburgh went this year. They got only one Western Pennsylvania player out of their 21-person class. Their class ranked 62nd overall. They got one 4-star into Pittsburgh this year, did the Panthers. As far as the team at large, like I've said a couple of times, I think that this is a year where the Pitt Panthers have a lot to prove, and perhaps more importantly, I think this year is a year that the Pitt Panthers have a lot to lose. Cade Bell stepped in as the offensive coordinator last year. They improved immediately, going from the year before, the 116th ranked offense in the nation, to the 31st offense last year. That is also the reason Pitt went from 3 wins to 7 wins last year. Here is the good news for the Pitt Panthers, if there is any. They bring back 7 starters across their offense, their quarterback, running back, 2 of their 3 starting wide receivers, their center, right guard, and right tackle, all returning starters from an offense last year that got dramatically better. They also have Desmond Reed, who returns after being an all-ACC running back last year, 966 yards on the ground, 579 receiving yards out of the backfield last year. You also bring back Raphael Williams Jr., 1,000 yards with 9 touchdowns a season ago. Those are your primary weapons. They do have to replace the tight end. They do have to replace their number 2 wide receiver, so there is a step back there defensively. That's where the problem was for Pitt last year. In the 4 games after Halloween last year, they gave up 48, 37, 34, and 48 points. Those games down the stretch, not what you wanted to do in some of the bigger games that came across the docket. They gave up 24 to Virginia, 24 to Clemson, and that was a close game. They lost that game 24-20. They gave up 37 to Louisville, 34 to Boston College, and 48 to Toledo in the Game Above Sports Bowl, which, let's be real, you all just learned was the name of a bowl game last year. Defensively, this team last year was ranked about 112th in the nation in just about every stat last year, and most of the damage done to the Pitt defense was through the air. Why is that a problem this year? because there's a lot of good quarterbacks in this conference. Cade Klubnik, we talked about the kid from SMU. We talked about Louisville. We talked about George Tech, Haynes King, Kevin Jennings at SMU. We talked about Tommy Castellanos. I don't know if he's going to be a good quarterback at Florida State, but he's got Gus Malzahn, who's been very good at coordinating with the two-tool quarterback, the running, passing quarterback. Maybe he's in that mix. I don't know. The point here is this team had a second half collapse. By the way, don't forget, Pitt won 7 games in a row. They were 7-0. Pitt was being talked about as a playoff team, and then they dropped the last 5 in a row down the stretch. SMU, Virginia, Clemson, Louisville, and Boston College lost 5 in a row. It was a stellar collapse. It was a star imploding into a black hole collapse for Pitt. Can they bounce back this year? I don't know. I'm not quite there yet. Again, a lot of returning experience. Offensive coordinator who skyrocketed you 100 places in the overall offensive rankings. Is that enough to turn into something this year? We will see. Let's go to the SMU Mustangs, the team that faced down the Clemson Tigers in the ACC title game last year. Offensive tackle Jermod Evans was a revelation last year, earned a 5-star tag to finish last year's cycle as the number 20 overall prospect. He is in the class. They have also got Ty Hawkins, a 4-star quarterback, in the mix should something happen to Kevin Jenkins. 2 receivers in the recruiting class, Jalen Cooper and Dalen Singleton, who are both expected to be playmakers out of the gate at the wide receiver position. This year, SMU 6th of the 17 teams in the ACC in 2025 recruiting, but that is because they dialed in on recruiting offensively. They dialed in on getting playmakers. They went to the portal for the linemen. They went to young recruits who have high upside for the offensive side of the football. The Mustangs kind of considered party crashers last year in the ACC. Wins over Nevada and Houston Christian. They did lose a 3-pointer on the road at BYU, but they would not lose again in the regular season, dumping 66 in a win on TCU, 42 in a win on Florida State, 34 in a win over Louisville, 40 on Stanford in a win. They slipped by Duke in overtime, 28-27, put 48 on Pitt, 38 on BC, 33 on Virginia, and 38 on Cal. And in that stretch, that was the stretch where Kevin Jennings did take over the QB1 role from Preston Stone. Of course, they lost 34-31 to Clemson in the ACC title game, and they got blown out in the playoff by Penn State, 38-10. So where do they want to go from here? With last season coming to a conclusion with a thud, Kevin Jennings said, "I want to run it back." They have won 11 games in a consecutive season for the first time for SMU, dating back to the early 80s in the old Pony Express. But Rhett Lashley said a few days ago, we have a long way to go if we want to get to a national championship again, but hopefully this is a way to say, okay, SMU is back. We're competing and winning against Power 4 schools. Now we'll have to see if we can sustain it. So what's this team look like? Most of the gains accomplished over the final 9 games of the regular season, as we just talked about, averaging over 40 points per game and defeating opponents by an average of 19.8 points. Their offense ranked 8th in FBS in scoring last year and returns 3 important weapons for Kevin Jennings in Jordan Hudson, who had 39 grabs for 422 yards and 5 touchdowns. Tight ends RJ Maryland, who had 24 receptions for 359 and 4 tutties, and Matt Hibner, 23 grabs for 368 and 4 touchdowns. The problem is the transfer portal's out. They had a departure of LJ Johnson Jr. He went to Cal. That was a big blow in the run game. Redshirt freshman Derek McFall and Miami transfer Chris Johnson Jr. will both try to fill that gap in the running back position. There are no returning running backs. They are replacing 2 of their 3 wide receivers, and at least one of them will have to be replaced by a freshman. SMU allowed 326 per game last year defensively, but they do have a very good secondary with Ahmad Moses, 73 total tackles, 6 for a loss, 3 picks, and a defensive touchdown. And Isaiah Nwokobia, 100 total tackles, 4 for a loss, 3 picks last year. And they've got a very good linebacker, a name you will hear quite a bit this year, in Alex Kilgore, 56 total tackles, 3 for a loss, and a sack. playing the middle last year. He will be playing his natural position this year. They also added transfers across the D-line from Baylor, Louisville, Purdue, East Carolina, and UCF. Again, another team playing the law of averages out of the portal. If we go grab 70 linemen out of the portal, we are hoping 2 of them will hit, and we see if that plays out. I do think SMU has the talent offensively to be a team that averages 37, 40 points a game and just shoot out their way back to an ACC title. I think Clemson is a better football team. But again, one of the big questions for Clemson is you got everybody back, you got everybody healthy. Will the defense reach the expectations? If you want to beat SMU in the regular season or the ACC title game, that has to be the case. If you are not Clemson ready defensively to go up against a team that can put up 48 easily, that could be a trouble spot. Let's very quickly do Stanford here, primarily because I do not have a ton of expectations out of this team. I will say this, in the recruiting class, Lonzo, they got a quarterback named Bear Bachmeier. That's a good quarterback name. Yeah, that's a quarterback name. Yeah, I don't know. I might go offensive line. I feel like Bear is like a left guard's name, that big bruising mauler inside guy. Anyway, they got Bear Bachmeier out of the portal. He brings his receiver over with him as a transfer from BYU as well. John Anthony Hall should be able to step in and play in the position as well. But I just, unfortunately for the Stanford Cardinal, it's just a talent issue for this football team. They just do not have the dogs that they need to compete with the teams at the top. Again, maybe they're a team that can pull a couple of upsets. This was a team last year that had 3 regular season wins. One of them did come over Louisville, which is something to be said, but Clemson hung a 40 burger on them. Virginia Tech beat them 31-7, Notre Dame 49-7, SMU 40-10, NC State 59-28, and they lost to San Jose State to wrap up their season last year. They're bringing back, I believe, 3 offensive starters this year and either 4 or 5 defensive starters. So there's a mild bit of experience on the defense, not very much at all on the offensive side of the football. Frank Reich, we all know the name. We've all talked about him quite a bit. I have zero idea why Stanford decided this was the dude they wanted to put into the head coaching role, but that's who they went with, and I think you're going to get a very Frank Reich result out of it. I do not expect much, if anything, at all at Stanford. In fact, if you are an ACC team that has Stanford on your schedule this year, congratulations. That's your tune-up game. I just don't think that, listen, I'm trying to be, it is propaganda extravaganza. I'm trying to be as excited and optimistic and up as I can be for this conference because, as I mentioned, I do think it's going to be a down year. But let's approach it from the standpoint of everybody's going to hit the roof. I think the roof for Stanford this year is probably 6-6. They're at Hawaii and at BYU to open, back home for Boston College before they travel to Virginia. Then it is a 3-pack at the crib, San Jose State, SMU, and Florida State through the month of October, at Miami to wrap up October. Then it's back home for Pitt, at North Carolina, back home for Cal and Notre Dame. Honestly, I think this team is if they're 4-8, they should be happy. That's just where Stanford is under Frank Reich. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to run to our final top of the hour break. Here's what we've got coming up for you in the final hour of the show. Jim Phillips will be starting his State of the Conference address here in about 7 minutes from right now. I'm going to see if we can get plugged in. We can listen to a little bit of that press conference and react to it in real time. We are also going to finish off our look at all the teams in the ACC with Syracuse, Virginia, Virginia Tech, and Wake Forest. And in the final segment of the next hour, we will take a look at the 15 most important games on the ACC schedule as a whole this year. I will break down the games that I think are the ones to circle on the calendar now and tell your friends who are selfish jerks who get married in the fall who would have the audacity that you're booked those days. I'll tell you the games that I think impact the conference race, impact the national championship race, impact the playoff race, and we'll do all of that in the next hour of the show. Now, if you were to attach winning and losing records to sports flashes, Lonzo would be an annual 12-0 college football playoff, but only for sports flashes performer. I mean, just listen to this.
He was so put off last night. We had the women's matchup. Roxanne Perez and Raquel Rodriguez. He was I forgot who they're going.
At one point, it got so bad, I had to remove myself from the game. It was just at times, I get it, there's an entertainment value, they're wearing kind of special, nothing, I guess you could say, they're all kind of put together. Really short round,
We had limited.
He was so disgusted. It's 8-3 Braves in the seventh inning.
We're
So
limited.
they go to commercial. We flip over. Well, how are we going to tag championship? And Finn goes, I'm so serious. Put the Braves back on. No, I'm not putting the
We
Braves
were
back
limited
on.
in our viewing options. It was a blowout for the Braves. It was WGE Monday Night Raw or whatever else on like Lions, which I don't know if it was appropriate viewing for the group.
That's not a group effort.
Something off of 83 or 63. I don't know what. Anyway, coming up, we'll get a chance to see what former Brave about his former Brave getting for SWAT. Jeffrey and Brewer will join us. Jeffrey.
Or the every time.
Making it easy.
Yeah.
Put it all on one plate.
Yeah, if they have like a muffin of some sort and a Coke Zero.
And away we go, ladies and gentlemen, the Rob Brown Show on your radio in Charlotte, North Carolina. Yo, day 1 of 3 of the ACC Media Days is underway. The commissioner of the Atlantic Coast Conference, Jim Phillips, is currently giving his State of the Conference address. As we speak, I am trying to see if we can tap into that. If we cannot, while it is happening, then I will let you know that we will be pulling we'll pull sound from that. We will have some of the most important clips from Jim Phillips, as well as the rest of the ACC's most important players. Today, we have not just the commission forum happening right now, but Cal, Miami, SMU, Stanford, and Virginia are all here. And just to let y'all know kind of how this event is set up to work. This year, unlike years gone by where the team showed up and effectively the Atlantic Coast Conference said, here's your interview schedule, hit that table, that table, that table. This year, they put the schools in charge of scheduling their own interviews throughout the week. So what I do know is that we have put in a request to every school, asking for head coach, asking for starting quarterback, asking for the stars of the program, whoever we can get. And we have gotten back a couple of, unfortunately, we won't make it. We have gotten a couple of, let us evaluate the schedule, we'll let you know. And we've got a couple of yeses. Obviously, the teams that are in the top of the pecking order this year, we are talking about Clemson, we are talking about SMU, we are talking about Miami. A little bit tougher to get. As a matter of fact, I just watched a few minutes ago, the Miami contingent came down. They did their interviews with 2 stations out of Miami over to my right, and then immediately went right back up the stairs. I spoke during that last break to the on-site sports information director from Miami and said, look, if I can get Mario Cristobal on later, if I can get Carson Beck on early, I'd love the opportunity. I know you guys are booked up, but if anybody cancels, if anybody knows shows, please let me know. And I got told, yeah, we'll let you know. And that's pretty much how, to some degree, the event is going to go. I will be here. I will be, as the expression goes, I think, busting hump over the next few days to get us all the content that we can get. But I will also tell you that I will be in after we go off the air at 10 o'clock. I will be in every State of the Union. I will be in every interview session, every Q&A breakout that I can get in. I will also tell you that we will have, over the next 2 days, not today, but over tomorrow and Thursday, as we will be live here tomorrow and Thursday as well. I have already spoken to the folks up at the ACC Network. I do know West Durham will be coming by at some point over the next couple of days. I did realize this morning, and it didn't really jump out to me until, and I don't know why it didn't jump out to me until this morning, but one of my favorite interviews, Lonzo, over the past 3 years running, that I have very much enjoyed having, because I think she kills it talking football. One of my favorite interviews has been Kelsey Riggs, now Kelsey Riggs Cuff. Kelsey is now a Sports Center anchor. She has moved on all the way to Bristol, Connecticut, no longer with the ACC Network, and it just hit me during the break. As I went up to the folks at the ACC Net to kind of put in a request for them. Can we get West Durham? Can we get EJ Manuel? Can we get some of the big names from the Net to come down? As I went up the stairs, and I was like, oh, I got to ask for Kelsey. I'd love to have Kelsey back. I made the realization, Kelsey's no longer with us. And I don't mean that in the dramatic she's dead way. I mean, she got promoted. She's a Sports Center anchor. She's in Bristol. Super pumped for her because she's an amazing person. I mean, I don't know. We'll never find out. They're so far away that I don't think unless I went full Bon Scott from AC/DC, am going to make an impact on the network TV show this year. I'm at the point now where, Zoe, I almost want to say that over the past 3 years, we have shifted progressively further away. Radio Row has shifted progressively further away from the ACC Network television set. And I'm not going to say that's explicitly because of me, but I'm not going to not say that. That's a possibility. Ooh. I'm intrigued. There's some drama playing out here at ACC Media Days. All right. Here's what we are doing on today's show. Obviously, the sound and the guests are just getting started. That is the pitfall and peril of being a morning show, is that all the stuff happens after we get off the air. So, as today, in the early AM portion of the show, we don't have the sound yet, and we won't be able to get an opportunity to record interviews with guests until later on in the day. I wanted to go today on the show through the Atlantic Coast Conference as a whole, because I have said a number of times, I don't have super high expectations for this conference this year. I'm not assuming the worst for every team. I'm assuming the mid for every team. You'll get a couple wrong by undershooting. You'll get a couple right by overshooting. But I think the majority of teams are going to probably be reaching around the middle of what I consider to be both their ceiling and consider to be their floor. But as Clemson obviously comes into this event as the odds-on favorite to win the Atlantic Coast Conference this year, as there will be much discussion about their capability and possibility of doing so, I do think it is important to analyze every team in the conference. I do think it is important to take a look at every team in the conference and what they bring to the table that could impact the ACC as a conference top to bottom, the ACC championship game, how many teams the ACC sends to what I believe will be the final year of the 12-team playoff, because we're going to 16 next year. Sorry to Tony Petitti. It's absolutely happening. And we'll see what happens when we get there. We have made it up through SMU and Stanford as we go in alphabetical order. I will also say that if you have missed any of the teams, specifically if you have missed your team, then right after the show is over, you should go to thefanupstate.com. There is a button right in the dead center of the page that says podcast. You tap that button, it's going to drop down a drop-down menu that provides you with two options. One of them is the Rob Brown Show. One is Wire to Wire, our afternoon show with Cole Bryson and Diesel. I want you to tap the Rob Brown Show. When you do, every day, Lonzo is kind enough, out of the graciousness of his oversized heart. And I mean that in the kind, compassionate way, not in the medical professional kind of way. In the kindness of his bleeding heart, Lonzo uploads at the end of every day all 4 hours of the show individually and the show as a whole for you to download and listen to on demand at your leisure. So if, let's say, hypothetically, you're a Duke fan, and you want to hear what old Rob Brown had to say about the Duke Blue Devils this year under Manny Diaz, well, worry not, my dear friends. You can go to thefanupstate.com, go to the podcast session, click the Rob Brown Show, go back to hour number 1, and listen to that. Maybe you're a Miami fan and you go, wait a minute, Rob's been ragging on Mario Cristobal the whole ride. Is he still there? Has anything changed his mind? Go back and listen to hour number 2 and you'll find the answer to that. So let's keep going. Let's get as many in as we can to wrap up this and the next segment. In the final segment of the show, we are going to take a look at the top 15 games in the conference, in my opinion, that will matter, that will influence the conference, the playoffs, and potentially the national championship. We left off with Stanford. Let's pick it up with Syracuse. Fran Brown's second class, 35 high school players making their way to upstate New York to be newest members of the Syracuse Orange. They also bring in 7 transfers a year after bringing in 45 combined new players last year. This class does not have a bunch of star player. Out of 35 high school players on the recruiting list, 14 are across the line of scrimmage, 7 on the offensive line, 7 on the defensive line. But again, these are guys that are kind of in the Syracuse wheelhouse. It is not that traditional New York City vibe. It's a much more upstate, blue-collar, grounded out style vibe, which makes sense why Fran Brown decided to spend the majority of his time recruiting offensive and defensive linemen. In terms of what they add to the roster, they lose Kyle McCord, obviously made his way to the NFL. How do they replace him? Well, the opener will be a transfer from Notre Dame. Steve Angeli will take over. They also have waiting in reserve Ricky Collins, a backup at LSU, who is transferred over. Neither one of those guys have been QB1 at their respective schools. Both of those guys played behind guys who were pretty good QB1s at those two schools. So these are two guys that have intriguing talent, intriguing upside. We don't know what that ceiling is for them. But the fact that they were recruited to those teams, the fact that they were in line to eventually become QB1, says that they at least had to have something coming out of high school. The spring transfer of wideout Trebor Pena to Penn State was a big blow, one of the leading wide receivers for the Orange last year, but they bring over Justice Ross Simmons, who missed the first several games of the season last year, back into a starting rotation. Darrell Gill Jr. has shown some flashes. There's a lot of youth at the wide receiver core. Emmanuel Ross, Jalen Hornsby. They also bring in a transfer in Jonte Cook II out of Texas, who, again, Texas was wide receiver U the last couple of years. And this cat was just right there on the border, but could not crack the starting lineup. He'll get the opportunity to at Syracuse. They did lose running back LaQuint Allen, who went 7th round in the NFL draft, but they bring over Will Nixon and Yasin Willis, both returners who played heavily in reserve roles last year. The problem for this team is across the offensive line. They have one returning starter from last year, Demetrius Weatherspoon. They have a lot of transfers. Austin Collins from Louisville, Naquil Bertrand comes from Alabama. They bring in Zach Rice, who comes over from UNC, TJ Ferguson from Florida State, and a name that many of you Gamecocks are familiar with because we all thought that this guy was going to be an absolute stud for South Carolina. Cam Pringle has transferred over from South Carolina as well. On the defensive side of the ball, this team could not stop the run to save their butts last year. They did get a win over Georgia Tech in week 2. They lost to Stanford, knocked off Holy Cross UNLV, and they did get a 1-touchdown win over NC State. They did drop the ball, allowing 41 and a 41-13 loss to Pitt, knocking off Virginia Tech before losing 37-31, not 71, to Boston College. They suffered a 42-38 very close loss to Miami at the end. I'll tell you this, I like Fran Brown a lot. I like the direction of the Syracuse Orange a lot. I like the style of football that he brings. It is kind of that old school, nitty-gritty upstate New York team. There's a lot of buzz to this team. A 10-win season last year, a number of high-profile transfers that were being sought by many, many Power 4 teams. But the problem is it is a team with very, very little experience overall, A, and B, the schedule is rough, even for an ACC team. They are opening with Tennessee and Atlanta. Brutal. Then they got UConn and Colgate before they open ACC play on the road at Clemson. Back home for Duke. They got to go to SMU, back home for Pitt. Then they got to go to Atlanta again for Georgia Tech. Back home for North Carolina. Then listen to the finish. At Miami, at Notre Dame, back home for Boston College. And again, with a team that has one returning offensive line starter, with a team that has one returner at all starting across the offense, and just 3 returning defensive starters from last year. A lot of guys getting their first snaps at the whatever position they play one this year could lead to problems for the Syracuse Orange. I will say this, I think in 2026, the Syracuse Orange are formidable. I think in 2026, after a year of experience for a lot of these guys, assuming that they do not get decimated by the transfer portal out after the 2025 season, if they can end this year 6-6, 7-5, I think the year after that, and I mean it when I say it, I think Syracuse could be an outside threat and an ACC champion in 2026. Let's get Virginia in here very quickly before we run to the break. They went heavy in the portal this year. 19 high school prospects. Everybody else in a large class came out of the portal to bring Chandler Morris, a North Texas transfer, 4 offensive line transfers, including multiple former 4-star offensive linemen making their way to go play for the Virginia Cavaliers. This team is one that has, I don't think, much, if anything, in the way of expectations heading into the 2025 season. This is a team that last year, the University of Virginia ended up with losses to Maryland, Louisville, at Clemson, North Carolina, at Notre Dame, SMU, and Virginia Tech. It's not an awful list of 7 losses. I mean, as losses go, you could have had worse losses in that. The loss to Maryland is a bit of a blow. You'd like to have the Louisville game back. It was a 1-score loss. Clemson, understandable. You'd like to have the North Carolina blowout back, but that was one of those games that Amarian Hampton got himself drafted in the first round with. You'd like to have the Virginia Tech loss back to end the year last year, because that was probably the only one that you go, hey, you probably could have, should have, would have won that game. But again, Tony Elliott is a guy who this offseason said, we're going to beef up the offensive line. Like, we're going to make sure that we can run the ball and we can protect the ball. We talked a minute ago about Chandler Morris taking over a quarterback coming over from North Texas. He was top 10 in NCAA football last year in yards, touchdowns, and total offense. He comes up to a Virginia team that ranked 107th in the country and averaged just under 23 points per game last year. But there are some names out there. He did lose Malachi Fields, responsible for over 800 yards of receiving last year, headed to Notre Dame. But they bring in Jaden Thomas from Notre Dame, a 1-for-1. They also bring in Jamal Erdine from Purdue and Cam Ross from JMU to add to a long list of returning wide receivers who have a good amount of experience. The good news for Tony Elliott as he beefs up the line is that they're deep at running back this year. In fact, Virginia should be a team that's running the ball probably north of 40 times per game at a minimum. Xavier Brown had 488 yards last year. Jamari Taylor had over 1,800 yards at North Carolina Central, transfers in. Isaiah Augustif transfers from Colorado. Harrison Whaley from Wyoming, guys that play reserve roles but heavy usage in reserve roles for their teams. The question mark is the line. Tony Elliott brought in, as we just mentioned, a buttload of offensive linemen. Can law of averages find them a consistent offensive line? They have 2 returning starters from last year, and Noah Josie at the left guard and Mikhail Boley at the left tackle spot. But I don't think anybody's starting spots are necessarily safe. On the defensive side, probably a good defensive front 7. Cam Robinson, James Jackson, Trey McDonald, all 3 linebackers starting last year, all come back this year. Those are seasoned, rugged vets in the middle. They bring back Jameer Carter and Anthony Britton. They're inside tackles. They added a couple of guys on the outside. Fisher Kaimak comes over from UNLV. Mitchell Melton from Ohio State. Kazim Moore from Elon. These are all athletic edge rushers. So they've got the makings of a very good front 7. The problem is front 7 will have to be good, because the defensive backfield is going to be okay. They bring back 1 starting defensive back from last year, Jam Jackson, but he suffered a knee injury in the spring. He could be sidelined for as much as the entire season this year, in which case they would have no defensive backs returning from last year. They did add 6 transfer defensive backs, including Christian Charles out of Tennessee, Devin Neal from Louisville, Emmanuel Carnley from Miami, and Jordan Robinson from Cincinnati. Kind of the same thing. And I see what Tony Elliott's trying to do here. He's looking, he's going, we got one of the most dynamic throwing quarterbacks in NCAA football last year. Assuming he's able to translate that to ACC play, we got an offense that can be explosive, that can get us past 22.8 points per game this year. We can go compete offensively. But we got to be able to stop some guys too. And since we don't have the dudes, we're just going to bring in a whole lot of transfers. And again, I think you're going to see a lot of coaches doing this moving forward. I think you're going to see a lot of coaches who use the transfer portal to play the numbers game, the law of averages. I need 2 defensive tackles, so I'm going to bring in 5 and try to make sure I law of averages my way into finding 2 defensive tackles. And if Virginia's successful in that, their front 7 might be good enough to change some games. And if the quarterback, if Chandler Morris is dynamic at Virginia, like he was in North Texas, maybe Virginia can jump up and scare some folks. They open with Coastal Carolina, then it's to NC State, back home for William & Mary, Stanford, and Florida State in a 3-game home stretch. Then it's at Louisville, back home for Washington State, back-to-back roadies at North Carolina and Cal, back home for Wake, at Duke, and they wrap it up with Virginia Tech. We'll talk when we come back here in just a minute about the remainder of the schools we have not gotten to yet. They include Virginia Tech and Wake Forest. And then the final segment, the biggest 15 games on the ACC slate this year. That's all coming up on the Rob Brown Show. Special presentation live from ACC Media Days, courtesy of our friends at Ingles. Low prices, love the savings. It is the Fan Upstate.
Coming up, a NBA franchise is called
The Rob Brown Show live from ACC Media Days here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Glad to have you all along with us for 4 hours today, tomorrow, and Thursday. And when we are done on the air here at 10 a.m., I'll be pulling sound from the conversation that Jim Phillips is having right now, the State of the Union address for the Atlantic Coast Conference. We'll have some of the most important clips from his speech on the show tomorrow. Joining him today at SEC Media Days are the University of Miami, Cal, SMU, Stanford, and Tony Elliott and Virginia. We will get as much sound and content from this event as we can over the next 3 days, and we'll get to you all live here on the Rob Brown Show and the Fan Upstate. But we are running through every school in the ACC, all 17 teams that will be playing under the ACC's banner this year, predominantly because, as I've said a number of times, listen, Clemson's the runaway favorite. I suspect SMU in the media projected order to finish poll. I project SMU is going to finish second or third. Miami will be in the other position, however those two teams wrap up. My guess right now is that it'll be Clemson 1, Miami 2, SMU 3, Louisville 4. We'll talk about that. But I do think that because it is college football, and the reason we love college football is just how absolutely dramatic it can be, there is the possibility that maybe there's a surprise team lying in wait out there. Maybe there's a team that had a great transfer portal class that gels. Maybe there's a team out there that has a quarterback considered middle of the pack who has a career all-time season. Who knows? So we're taking a look at every team in the ACC, and we have just 2 left to get to. We'll get to the Virginia Tech Cavaliers next. Brent Pry is the head coach of the Cavaliers. This is a team that Hokie fans have, I think, unfortunately, lost a lot of faith in. This is a team last year that lost to Vanderbilt. They lost to Rutgers. They did have a close game, but lost to Miami, and down the stretch lost to Syracuse, Clemson, and Duke. They did get Virginia in the rivalry bowl, but then they lost to Minnesota in the Duke's Mayo Bowl. 12 of the 20 high school prospects signed by Brent Pry were in-state players. 4-star running back Jeffrey Overton Jr. comes out of Virginia. And 4-star quarterback Jamari Deloach comes out of Chesapeake, Virginia. Oscar Smith led the way. The Hokies also went heavy in the winter transfer portal. 19 incoming players, including 3 offensive linemen and 4 defensive linemen. Offensively, they make a change at the coordinator position. They bring up Tulane coach Philip Montgomery to be the new OC. We talked about Tulane earlier. They've got a transfer quarterback out. They also just signed the kid out of BYU who expects to go there and throw the ball around. But Tulane was throwing the ball around because of Philip Montgomery. He has also been the offensive coordinator at Houston, Baylor, and Auburn, so plenty of experience there. He is a big quarterback developer, which is why Kyron Drones is the project that he elected to sign on with. He is a dual threat quarterback, did have a number of lower leg injuries late last season and a few more in this spring. He is a power running quarterback, loves to run behind the center, loves to run up the middle into the teeth of a defense, which is, when you suffer from a litany of lower body injuries, something that you need to be very careful about. Just about everyone around him figures to be new. In fact, the only returning starter from last year Hokie offense was Benji Gosnell, a 6'5", 254-pound junior tight end. Outside of that, 0 returning starters on the offensive line, 0 returning starters at the running back, 0 returning starters at the wide receiver position. They do have some transfers in. Bowling Green transfer Terrion Stewart, the likely candidate to be the starting running back. They will run behind Kyle Altuner, one of several transfers who followed a new offensive line coach, Matt Moore, over from West Virginia. They do have a couple of names that come back at specialist position. Aiden Green is now joined by Cameron Selden, one of the many wide receivers that transferred out of Tennessee. Donovan Green transfers from Wake Forest. They have a number of transfers in from mid-level schools, and there is something that I think is very interesting that we may need to pay attention about that. So I don't know, man. Like I'm interested in hearing. And Lonzo, you absolute genius. I believe that is exactly problem was with our audio. So those of you that are watching on the stream, let us know if the audio is fixed now, because I think that may have been exactly it. Good tech shooting.
Well, it only took me 3.5 hours to think of it, but
Yep. So that's our bad. I believe our audio should be good now. For those of you watching on the live stream at facebook.com/thefanupstate, the Fan Upstate on YouTube, or on Twitter, streaming at all 3 destinations. The same is true with the Rob Brown Show, streaming on Facebook, streaming on YouTube, and on Twitch. I believe the audio issues are now worked out, and that also makes sense why there was so much background noise. My bad. All right, I'm not a tech guy. I'm a dumb guy with a microphone on. What do you want?
I'm not a tech guy either. I'm like a grandpa.
That's why it took us 3 hours and 31 minutes to figure it the hell out. Good call. All right, so on the defensive side of the ball, Bud Foster retired back in 2019. The Hokies have had 3 defensive coordinators in 6 years. They bring over Sam Sifkes in the latest, hired after spending the previous 4 seasons in the NFL. He will inherit a unit that lost 12 players who either started or played heavy snaps in 2024. They do have a strong defensive line. Returner Kevin Gilliam Jr. and Keyshawn Burgos are the 2 starting returners on the D-line this year. They do have Jaden Keller and Caleb Woodson, 2 returning linebackers from last year, but it is the defensive backfield, again, that will be a problem. Both corners, both safeties will have to be replaced. The Hokies are hoping that second-year player Quentin Reddish can make a big jump at the position. They do have a number of transfers in. Tyson Flowers from Rice, Sherrod Koval, a Clemson guy, makes his way over. Isaiah Brown-Murray from ECU give them options with depth. So a team you'll probably be able to throw the ball on early in the season. Will a new DC with NFL experience be able to develop some guys and fix that? We'll find out. And we will wrap it up with a very quick take on Wake Forest. They had a December signing period that forced them to hit the transfer portal to help a class that finished 15th in the ACC in recruiting rankings this year. They have a new coach in Jake Dickert, hired as coach following the resignation of Dave Clawson earlier this year. It meant going to the portal to supplement a 20-member class. They did have 4-star offensive lineman Deshaun Offit of Winchester, Virginia, signed 23 winter transfers signed with Wake Forest as well, including former Charlotte quarterback Deshaun Purdy. Wake Forest is a team that, again, not much of the way of expectations. This is an entire overhaul for a team that lost 8 games last year. Their wins came over North Carolina A&T. They did win at NC State, at UConn, and at Stanford, but just about everybody else worth their salt last year were able to knock off Wake Forest. It is, again, a total overhaul, except for the running back position, where Damon Claiborne, amongst the best in the ACC, did come back. That was a huge priority for Jake Dickert, their new head coach. They are building around his 1,049 yards, 23 receptions, and 13 touchdowns from last year. Robbie Ashford, front runner at quarterback, spent 2 years at Oregon, was a sometime starter at both Auburn and South Carolina before he arrived at Wake in January. His most productive season, 2022, for the Auburn Tigers. 9 starts, 7 touchdowns, but was picked off 7 times as well. Deshaun Purdy, as we mentioned, coming over from Charlotte, started 6 games as a true freshman last year. That is your QB competition. Depth at receiver is the problem here. Micah Mays had just 16 catches last year, going to be one of their leading receivers, the only deacon back with any experience. Carlos Hernandez comes over from Washington State along with his former coach in Dickert after catching 55 passes in 2 years. Sterling Burkhalter caught 11 at Cincinnati last year on the defensive side of the football. They do have more starters coming back than a handful of other teams, 5 of them, with 2 in the defensive line, 1 at linebacker, and 2 both at the safety position. They will be running a expected nickel defense as their base next year. This is a major challenge for Wake Forest. I think that is the reason Dave Clawson stepped away after 11 seasons with 7 bowl games, basically just looked and said, 2 winning seasons in 17 years. The good news, pretty easy schedule as the ACC goes. Kennesaw State, Western Carolina, they open SEC play on 9/11 against NC State. Then they've got Georgia Tech, at Virginia Tech, and at Oregon State. Back home for SMU, at FSU, at Virginia. Then they end it with North Carolina, Delaware, and Duke. Again, if everybody lives up to potential, this is a team that's probably going to win 4 games, maybe 5. But if there's a handful of mid teams, like many of you are suggesting there definitely will be, I think this team could threaten to be a 6-6 bowl eligible team, assuming the portal class gels well. When we come back, final segment of the show, we take a look at the 15 biggest games on the schedule in the entire conference this year, how they shape up to impact the conference championship game, and the playoffs. We'll do that when we come back. A special edition of the Rob Brown Show, presented by our friends at Ingles, is live at ACC Media Days in Charlotte, North Carolina. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Fan Upstate.
From the 2025 ACC kickoff at the Hilton Charlotte Uptown, you're listening to a special edition of the Rob Brown Show, powered by your local Ingles Market. Low prices, love the savings.
Only on the Fan.
We have, so far this morning, taken a deep dive into a few different things. We've taken a deep dive into all 17 teams that will play their ACC ball under that banner this year. We have talked about the storylines. We have talked about the narratives. We have talked about the highs and lows, the off seasons, everything that could come into play for each of these teams in the 2025 football season. And over the next few days, we'll get more in depth into that. We'll start breaking down more of the quarterbacks, the head coaches, the expectations, the coaches that are maybe on the hot seat, the coaches who are maybe rising superstars in the future, et cetera, et cetera. We'll get as much sound as we can from players and coaches and media personalities who drive the college football landscape and more. So here's what I'd like to do as we wrap up the radio broadcast today. I want to take a look at the biggest games on the calendar across the SEC schedule in 2025. Now, I did go through and I picked out the most important interconference games, most important games being played by ACC teams against ACC teams. But I also wanted to pick out the games that are the biggest for the ACC against teams out of conference as well. And with that being said, here are the games that I selected as the most important games, top to bottom, on the schedule, with a couple of brief thoughts of each. Let's start on August 30th. Let's start at the very, very beginning. On that Saturday, there are 3 games involving ACC teams, and all 3 games, ACC teams will be playing SEC teams right out of the gate. Alabama will be at Florida State. Listen, Florida State wants a bounce-back season. Florida State wants to prove that 2-10 last year was the most anomaly of anomalies, was just an absolute worst-case nightmare scenario, and that they're fine. They're back. They went heavy into the high school recruiting this year. It is not a solely and exclusively portal team this year, as it has been the last 2. 1 year, 13-0 undefeated ACC champs got blackballed from the playoffs. 1 year, 2-10, the worst year in the history of Florida State football. Alabama's going to go a long way in week 1 to proving that Florida State is back. And I'm not even saying it's got to be a dub for FSU. I'm just saying, can you compete? Can you compete with the team that was selected 3rd by the media in the Southeastern Conference? If you can compete in your house, in your crib, maybe there's something there. We'll find out. Also, that same day, LSU is at Clemson. LSU's lost 5 consecutive opening games. Brian Kelly is, in my opinion, I'm not going to say on the hot seat. I'm saying he's like doing the squat and hover thing, you know, where like you don't really want to touch the seat, but you got a reason to hover. That squat and hover thing, you know what I'm talking about. He can't lose this game. On the flip side, I've already mentioned a few times, if Clemson loses this game, this schedule, as easy as it looks, if you just do a once-over glance on paper, there's some dangerous spots on this schedule for Clemson. There's not much in the room for margin of error for the Clemson Tigers this year. A lot of you think that there is. I'm telling you right now, the schedule, although it is filled with teams that you are better than in every week, with the exception of maybe week 1, I think is the only team that I can't definitively say Clemson's better than is LSU. Outside of that, there's a lot of pitfalls. There's a lot of dangerous spots, a lot of sleeper games, a lot of trap games, a lot of exhaustion games, etc. So this game, a win in this game, gives you at least a little bit of room to breathe down the stretch. Also, if you beat LSU, I become more confident you can beat everybody else on your schedule after that as well. That same day, Tennessee and Syracuse. Listen, Tennessee, probably not as good as they were last year. Still a good team, still top half of the SEC, but like right at the bottom half of the top half. Syracuse, we've already talked about it. I like Fran Brown. I like the trajectory of the team. I also acknowledge that there is a long way to go before they are there. Can you compete? Can you keep it competitive in Atlanta, Georgia, in Mercedes-Benz Stadium? Then we go to August 31st, the very next day. South Carolina takes on Virginia Tech. It is matchup number 2 between an ACC and an SEC team. We all know what South Carolina is expecting to do this year. I'll tell you this. If Brent Pry loses this game, especially if Lenoris and the boys knock him down by like 35, Brent Pry immediately does go on the hot seat. I think he's already there. We'll find out. That same day, Notre Dame is at Miami. Carson Beck will make his debut for the Miami Hurricanes against the Fighting Irish. The Irish are a favorite to make the college football playoff this year. Not just make it. A lot of guys have tickets out on them to win the Natty this year. It is a relatively favorable schedule for the Irish this year, meaning Miami's margin for error pretty much a 0 if they lose that game. September 1st, TCU is at North Carolina. Why is that one? That's Bill Belichick's first game at home at Chapel Hill, and it is on Labor Day. One of a few highlight games that day. It'll be his first chance to show his team off to his new home crowd. September 6th, Illinois is at Duke. These are two teams with very veteran rosters, two teams coming off of very good seasons, relatively speaking, for them last year. Two teams that I think have a lot to prove this year. I've already told you I think it is one of Duke's best recruiting classes of all time. Can they segue that into success? September 13th, Clemson at Georgia Tech. We've talked about this game at length today. I think it's a danger game for Clemson. How much more do we need to say? September 20th, Florida is at Miami, an old Florida Sunshine State showdown. The Hurricanes thrashed the Gators last year. Can the Gators get it back this year? We'll find out. North Carolina at UCF. Scott Frost back at UCF and wants to ruin it for the Hoodie. September 27th, Louisville at Pitt. Just a rivalry game. They beat the crap out of each other. I expect no different. October 4th, Clemson at NC. UNC. Dabo versus Bill. Tigers have won 6 straight over the Tar Heels. Can Dabo make it 7 over a mentor? Miami at Florida State is that same day. Big rivalry game. I don't need to elaborate. NC State at Notre Dame on October 11th. Dave Doran and the Wolfpack, a rare trip up to South Bend, Indiana on October 17th. Louisville is at Miami, a Friday nighter in South Beach. This might be the one that determines if Jeff Brom and the boys are for real or not. October 18th, SMU at Clemson. Long-awaited rematch of last year's ACC title game. You already know what that one means. North Carolina at Syracuse on Halloween night inside the Carrier Dome for a Hoodie to take on Fran Brown and the Orange. November 1st, Miami at SMU. Top-tier billing in the ACC standings could be on the board in this one. That same day, Duke is at Clemson. Again, Manny Diaz and the Duke Blue Devils would love to play the spoiler role there. November 8th, FSU at Clemson. On paper, two of the most talented teams in the ACC. Is Florida State going to punch themselves in the groin again, or will they get it together? This game will have a lot to say about that. Clemson-Louisville is November 14th. Another pivotal one for Dabo Swinney. FSU at NC State on the 21st. Another Friday night game at Carter Finlay. Again, if Mike Norvell's pointed in the right direction, this is one of the big challenge games to prove that it's done. Duke at North Carolina, Miami at Virginia Tech, both on the 22nd. On the 28th, Georgia at Georgia Tech. Look, is Brent Key the guy? If he even makes it competitive with Georgia, that would be a statement. And we wrap it up with November 29th. What else do we need to say? Rivalry weekend, Florida State, Florida, Clemson at South Carolina, and the Palmetto Bowl is going to be capital L lit.
And now, the Rob Brown Show presents Twitter.
All right, time to find out what is Xing. The first thing that we've got going on is Jared Jones.
Jared or Jerry?
Jerry.
Jared Jones. I'm assuming this has to do with the Micah Parsons situation. Still wanting a contract extension, still wanting some more money. Show me the money, said that one guy in Jerry Maguire. Who was it?
Cuba Gooding Jr.
Yes, Cuba Gooding Jr. said, show me the money. I should know that. That was in the wheelhouse. Anyway, Micah Parsons has said he is planning on showing up at camp even without an extension, which leads me to believe that is going to drive Jerry Jones further into his belief that he can just do whatever he wants without consequence. Good luck, Cowboys fans. I wish you the best.
Jerry has said something about him and about how, they've gotten burned before.
Hang on, let me hand you some tea so you can spill it.
That they've been burned before by players signing them.
That's literally Jerry's entire legacy is waiting too long to sign guys and then signing them for too much once they're past their production prime.
Yeah, well, that's what he said. Right. The next thing it's Xing is the Cosby Show.
Cosby Show is trending because yesterday Malcolm Jamal Warner passed away. Was on vacation and drowned while on vacation. Theo Huxtable, just 54 years old. Listen, I think the horror of the Bill Cosby story for the women who went through what they went through is tragic and horrific enough. But the fact that you had all these great actors and all these great stories and all that, and it just kind of ruined, which was one of the great legacy shows in the history of American television, is the second worst thing to come out of that situation. Theo Huxtable was one of those cats that, he was obviously dramatically older than me when he was on TV, but also kind of one of those dudes that, as a kid, when I watched The Cosby Show with my family, like Theo was a dude I looked up to. Like that dude's young, he's cool, he's fresh, he's hip. I want to be like Theo Huxtable when I grow up. And a lot of that was because Malcolm Jamal Warner. By the way, there were two guys at a bar I was sitting at last night when I got up here. There was a bar in the hotel. And while I was waiting on my car to get valeted, I was sitting at the bar talking to a couple of people that were there. And one of the guys, when we got into the conversation, because it came up on the TV and the news, he goes, I got to show you something. And he pulled his phone out and he showed me pictures. He apparently, this was like, what a random coincidence. This guy at the bar last night was friends with Malcolm Jamal Warner, like had known him for like a number of years. And he's like, this sucks. He was one of the nicest people I've ever met. So very sad to say farewell to Theo Huxtable.
Oh, definitely. All right. The next team that's Xing is Trey Hendrickson.
Trey Hendrickson Xing because Cincinnati just won't give him a deal because they're very dumb. Unless they gave him a deal in the last 4 hours.
They did not. They did not. He's posted a picture of him leaving town.
Beautiful. Can I tell you that as much as I despise what social media has done in the football world in terms of turning a very large group of football players into drama queens. And again, I'm all for being entertaining on social media. Like that's what it's there for. I do the dumb stuff all the time. But like there are times when I adore football players going full drama queen, and this is one of those times.
All right. And the last thing is Margot Robbie.
Margot Robbie is 44 years old today.
No, she has been cast in a movie I doubt you've seen before, but the remake by Tim Burton is The Attack of the 50-Foot Woman.
I want you to know.
She's going to be 50 foot tall.
I want you to know that the only thing that excites me more than Tim Burton remaking classic sci-fi horror B cult movies from back in the day is a 50-foot tall Margot Robbie. Mwah, let's do this. I'm ready for Margot Robbie to like Wolf of Wall Street, but knock down buildings while she's doing it. LFG, as the kids say. That's going to do it for us, people. Thank you for being here. Day number 1 of ACC Media Days. Well, the broadcasting side of it in the books. I'm about to head upstairs, see if we can get a conversation going with Jim Phillips. We'll hear from Miami, Tony Elliott at Virginia, and more. We'll have that sound for you tomorrow. I will be on with Colin Diesel at 4:20 this afternoon on Wire to Wire, and we will be back tomorrow to do it all over again, but better. Thanks to our presenting sponsor, Ingles. Low prices, love the savings. Thanks to you for listening. Lonzo and I will see you back here tomorrow. It's the Rob Brown Show on the Fan Upstate. Later.
Live from the 2025 ACC kickoff at the Hilton Charlotte Uptown. You're listening to a special edition of the Rob Brown Show, powered by your local Ingles Market. Low prices, love the savings.
Only on the Fan Upstate.
All right, dudes and dudettes on the stream. Appreciate all of you guys. Can you take the commercials out, Diamond, please? And thank you. Great one. Much appreciated. Those of you on the stream, I got a jet. I'm going to go upstairs and catch the end of Phillips and then start pulling sound from that. I will let you know what interviews we have booked up, if any, for tomorrow and the day after. Follow me on social media. I'm going to do a bunch of stuff. I got a cool little microphone that plugs into my phone, so it's good sound quality, and other millennial influencer things. Thank you for being here. You're all amazing people. Please tell your friends about us. I hate to beg, but I'm going to beg a lot because that's how we're going to get paid more money. And I would like that a lot. Also, Lonzo, there's a dude from Miami here, defensive lineman. I don't know his name off the top of my head. I need to find it. But he just rolled up into the building, and he is wearing an Ulafala. Do I go challenge him for it right now?
Yeah, I think you have to.
Challenge him for the role of Coral Gables tribal chief right now?
Just jump up and say, yo, Oos, and start eating.
For the record, this dude is, and I am not exaggerating, this dude's probably 6'8", 310, 315, and built like a brick bleep house. So no, because I would be Thanos'd into non-existence at the first contact.
Yeah, you probably don't want to do that then.
No, I don't. I have more respect for the Ulafala than that. All right, dudes on the stream, thank you guys for being here. You're all amazing. Tell your friends so that we can do this more and make more money and do cooler stuff and yada, yada, yada. You get it. You're all amazing. See you tomorrow. Hasta luego. Goodbye.